Hello and thank you for joining for tonight's stories. I hope you enjoy. The Voices in Black Pine. Eli, you awake? The radio crackled with Deputy Morale's voice, tinny and urgent. Elia's crow rolled onto his elbow, squinting at the glowing green numbers of his alarm clock, 3:17 a.m. He thumbed the receiver. Yeah, go ahead. Got a report of missing campers up near Black Ridge Pine, 4 college kids. Their parents say they were supposed to check in 6 hours ago. Morales paused. Dispatch tried their cells, straight to voicemail. Elias was already pulling on his boots, the leather creaking softly. He knew Black Ridge Pine, knew the way the wind sounded through the dead branches at night, like something whispering. Knew the way the ground dipped unexpectedly near the old sequoia grove, where the earth had swallowed more than one careless hiker. 20 minutes later, his truck bounced along the service road, headlights cutting through the pre-dawn fog. The forest here was dense, the trees crowding the road like spectators. He parked at the trailhead, the engine ticking as it cooled. His flashlight beam swept over a faded wooden sign, Black Ridge Trail, no camping past sunset. The nails were rusted. Someone had carved DNA plus Liam into the wood with a knife. Elia's boots sank into the damp earth as he stepped off the trail, the beam of his flashlight carving a shaky path through the underbrush. The air smelled like wet pine and something else, metallic almost. His radio hissed static, then Morale's voice cut through. Found their permit. Site 12B, half a click northwest of your position. Elias grunted in response, already pushing forward, his free hand brushing the grip of his sidearm out of habit. The first tent came into view like a gutted animal, nylon flaps torn outward, sleeping bags spilling their synthetic guts. A can of beans lay punctured near the fire pit, its contents glistening under his light. No blood, no signs of a struggle, just absence. Then his beam caught the boot. It stood upright, laces still tied as if someone had simply stepped out of it. The leather was warm when he touched it. Too warm. Inside, something thick and dark seeped into the tread. A branch snapped to his left. Elias spun, flashlight raised, but there was nothing. Just the trees, their shadows stretching long in the pre-dawn gloom. Then he saw the tracks. 3 sets sprinting north, deep gouges in the soft soil like they'd been running for their lives. 1 set staggered east, dragging something heavy. He crouched, fingers tracing the edges of a print. Too wide for a human, too deep. The radio crackled again. Eli, you copy? He didn't answer. North then, toward the sequoias. The sequoias loomed ahead, their massive trunks like prison bars in the half-light. Elias moved slower now, his flashlight dimmed to a dull glow. The tracks led him to a rotted-out giant, a sequoia split down the middle by lightning years ago, its hollow core gaping like a wound. The smell hit him first. Sweat, urine, the sour tang of fear. Then the whimper. Don't come closer. The voice was female, shaking. A flashlight beam flicked on, blinding him for a second before dipping to reveal 3 figures huddled in the tree's belly. A girl, Jenna, her name tag said, clutched a pocket knife in white-knuckled hands. Behind her, a guy with a bleeding lip, Marcus, his brain supplied, hyperventilated into his own knees. The third, Liam, just rocked back and forth, his pupils blown wide. Elias kept his hands visible. Ranger Crow, you're safe now. Jenna's laugh cracked like ice. Safe, safe, she pointed the knife past him into the dark. It talked to us in her voice. Elias felt the cold weight of his service pistol against his thigh, but kept his voice low and steady. Talked in whose voice, Jenna? Liam stopped rocking. His lips moved silently before the words tumbled out, cracked and raw. Dana's. It laughed like her, said my name. His fingers dug into his own arms, leaving crescent moons in the dirt-streaked skin. Behind them, the hollow sequoia creaked, a sound like old bones settling. Marcus grabbed Elia's sleeve, his breath coming in wet hitches. We were sleeping. Then Dana screamed, not like scared, like wrong, like something was learning how to scream. His fingers trembled. The tent ripped open. She was just gone, and then, he gagged, doubling over. Jenna finished for him, her voice hollow. Then it came back, wearing her voice like a fucking coat. A branch snapped outside the tree. Not wind, not an animal, deliberate. Elias killed his flashlight, plunging them into blackness. Jenna's knife clattered to the ground. For 3 heartbeats, there was only the sound of 4 people not breathing. Then the voice came, Dana's, sweet and clear, drifting through the dark like a ribbon of smoke. Liam, I'm scared. Marcus made a sound like a wounded animal. Jenna's fingers dug into Elia's arm, her nails drawing blood. Liam stood so fast his head cracked against the sequoia's rotted ceiling. Dana, he whispered, stepping toward the opening. Elias grabbed his wrist, but Liam twisted free with inhuman strength. She's alive, he hissed, stumbling into the underbrush. The forest went silent. Elias lunged after Liam, but the kid was already swallowed by the dark. The forest held its breath. No wind, no insects, just the thud of Liam's boots fading into nothing. Then Dana's voice again, closer now, syrup-thick with relief. You came for me. Marcus made a strangled noise and scrambled deeper into the sequoia's hollow, pressing himself against the damp wood. Jenna's fingers found Elia's sleeve again, her whisper jagged. That's not her. That's never been her. A wet crunch split the silence. The sound of a melon dropped on pavement. Liam's scream cut off mid-breath. Elias drew his pistol. Run, he ordered, shoving Jenna toward the eastern tree line. Ranger Station, 5 miles now. Marcus didn't move. He was curled into himself, knees to chest, rocking, his breath coming in shallow, whistling gasps. Elias grabbed him by the collar and hauled him upright. Marcus, look at me. The kid's eyes flickered, unfocused. Elias slapped him once, sharp, and something snapped back into place behind his pupils. Run. Jenna was already sprinting east, her sneakers kicking up clots of damp earth. Marcus stumbled after her, his arms flailing like a marionette with cut strings. Elias brought up the rear, his pistol sweeping the tree line. The forest had gone unnaturally still. No owls, no rustling underbrush. Just the hammer of their own footsteps and the ragged symphony of their breathing. Then the laughter started. It was Dana's voice this time. It was Marcus, a perfect mimicry of his reedy, panicked tone, but warped, stretched too thin. Jenna, wait, it called from the darkness to their left. Jenna faltered, her head whipping toward the sound. Elias caught her elbow, yanking her forward. Don't stop, he growled. Jenna's breath hitched as Marcus's voice, no, not Marcus, echoed again from the trees, closer now. I twisted my ankle, please. The words were frayed at the edges, like a recording played one too many times. Marcus himself was already 20 yards ahead, his sobs loud in the stillness. Jenna dug her nails into Elias' forearm, her whisper raw. That's exactly what he said last week when. A branch snapped behind them, then another to the right, then 3 in quick succession encircling them. Elias shoved Jenna forward, faster. His lungs burned. The thing wasn't just chasing them, it was hurting. The tree line thinned ahead, moonlight slicing through the branches. Ranger Station 9's floodlights glowed in the distance, a half-mile of open meadow between them and safety. Jenna stumbled, her knee hitting a rock with a wet crack. She didn't scream, just clutched her leg, her teeth clenched around the pain. Elias hauled her up, her blood slick on his palm. Behind them, the forest exhaled. It stepped into the moonlight. It wasn't tall at first. That was the worst part. It unfolded, joints popping like wet rope, spine elongating in jerky increments until it stood just shy of 7 feet. Dana's face hung slack between its shoulders, skin stretched too tight over what wasn't quite a skull. Its mouth opened, closed, opened again, and this time the voice was Elias' late wife, Sarah, the way she'd sounded in the hospice bed, waxy and exhausted. You left me here, Eli. Jenna made a sound like a stepped-on bird. Marcus didn't turn around. He was already sprinting for the floodlights, his arms pumping wildly. Elias fired 3 rounds center mass. The thing staggered back, black fluid bubbling from the wounds, but its jaw kept moving, Sarah's voice layering over itself into a chorus. Left me, left me, left me. Elias dragged Jenna upright. Move. She limped forward, her breath coming in punched-out wheezes. Behind them, the thing's footsteps squelched like it was walking on wet carpet. The meadow grass whipped at their shins, slick with dew. Jenna's knee gave out 30 yards from the station. Elias didn't hesitate. He scooped her under one arm like a sack of grain, his pistol still trained on the tree line. The thing had stopped at the edge of the meadow, its head cocked at an unnatural angle, watching. Marcus hit the parking lot first, his sneakers skidding on asphalt. He wrenched open the station door, screaming for someone, anyone, but the building stood dark and empty. Elias dumped Jenna onto the steps just as the first tendrils of dawn breached the horizon. The thing's silhouette wavered, its edges blurring like ink in water. For one suspended second, Elias thought it might step into the light. Then it twitched, a full-body spasm, and melted backward into the trees. The station door swung shut behind them with a click that felt too loud in the sudden quiet. Marcus collapsed against the wall, sliding down until his knees hit his chest again. His fingers twitched toward his bleeding lip, then away, as if afraid to touch his own face. Jenna pressed a wad of paper towels to her knee, her breath shallow and controlled. Elias checked the lock twice before turning to the radio. Static hissed as he twisted the dial. "Morales, come in." The silence stretched. Then so faint it could have been imagination. "Eli, come back." He killed the transmitter, his knuckles white around the mic. Jenna's head snapped up. Was that interference? Elias yanked the power cord from the wall. The overhead lights died, leaving them in the gray pre-dawn seeping through the blinds. He tossed Marcus a first aid kit from under the desk. "Patch her up." Marcus fumbled with the bandages, his hands shaking too badly to tear the packaging. Jenna snatched it from him with a sound halfway between a sigh and a sob. Outside, the meadow remained empty. No movement, no sound, just the slow creep of sunlight across the wet grass. The station's coffee maker wheezed to life, the sound like a dying animal. Elias watched the black liquid drip into the pot, his reflection warping in the glass. Jenna's knee had stopped bleeding, but she wouldn't meet his eyes. Marcus kept scratching at his arms, long, ragged streaks through the dirt and dried blood. "Tell me everything," Elias said, not turning from the coffee. "From the moment you set up camp." Jenna's laugh was brittle. "You saw the tents, you smelled it, what more do you?" "Jenna," the name cut through her panic like a knife. Elias turned, the scar over his eyebrow catching the weak light. "What did it do before it took Dana?" Jenna's fingers tightened around the bloody paper towels. It didn't take her." Her voice was a rusted hinge. "At first it just watched." Marcus made a choked sound, his scratching fingers freezing mid-motion. Jenna's eyes flicked to the boarded-up station window before continuing, each word dragged out like a confession. "We thought it was a bear, something big moving in the trees. Dana joked about it, said it was probably just some creep with binoculars." A shudder ran through her. Then the laughter started, not from the woods, inside the tent. Elias poured coffee into a chipped mug, the steam curling like smoke. "Go on." Jenna's knee twitched. Dana screamed, not like you'd scream if something grabbed you, like something was inside her throat. Marcus whimpered, folding in on himself. The tent ripped open, not from the outside, from the seams, like something. She mimed a bursting motion with her hands. The coffee in Elia's mug had gone cold, but he kept staring into its depths as if it might show him what Jenna was struggling to describe. Outside, a breeze picked up, rattling the station's loose shutter. Jenna flinched at the sound. Marcus, scratching, had turned frantic, his nails leaving raw tracks along his forearms. "It peeled her open," Jenna whispered. Not with hands, like pressure, like the air itself unzipped her. Her voice hitched. "We saw it happen. One second she was screaming, the next, her hands trembled. There was so much light, not fire, not electricity, just light where her skin had been, and then it was gone, and so was she." Elias set the mug down carefully, the ceramic clinking against the desk. His fingers lingered on the grip of his sidearm. And then it came back. Jenna nodded, her throat working silently for a moment before the words came. "Hours later, we were in the sequoia by then. It used her voice first, called Liam's name." She swallowed hard. But when it got closer, it wasn't just her anymore. There were others, layers, like a recording played over itself 100 times. Elias exhaled through his nose, slow and controlled. The coffee had left a bitter film on his tongue. He thumbed the safety off his sidearm, just in case, and studied Jenna's face. The girl wasn't lying. Worse, she wasn't hysterical. Her hands shook, but her voice had the eerie calm of someone who'd run out of panic hours ago. Marcus scratching had drawn blood. Elias tossed him a roll of gauze. "Wrap it." The kid stared at the white fabric like it was a snake. Jenna's knee had started bleeding again. She didn't seem to notice. "It learned," she murmured. At first it just repeated things Dana had said. Then her fingers twitched, started making sentences. By the time it got to the sequoia, it could improvise. The station's old fridge hummed to life, making them all flinch. Elias moved to the boarded-up window, peering through a crack in the plywood. The meadow stretched empty under the pale morning sun. No movement, no shadows that didn't belong, just grass swaying in a breeze that shouldn't exist, not after last night's stillness. Elias pressed his forehead against the cool plywood, the grain rough against his skin. The meadow looked empty, but the grass, there near the tree line, it wasn't just swaying. It was parting in a straight line like something heavy was dragging itself through the dew-heavy blades. No sound, no shadow, just that unnatural furrow creeping closer, stopping exactly where the floodlight's reach ended. Behind him, Marcus let out a wet sob. "It's learning the light," he whispered, pressing his bleeding arms to his chest. "Just like it learned our." The radio crackled to life without anyone touching it. Sarah's voice spilled from the speaker, but wrong, stretched thin over too many teeth. "Eli, the door's unlocked." Jenna's breath hitched. Elias didn't turn around. The furrow in the grass had frozen, waiting. Elias exhaled through his nose. The radio's static hissed louder, Sarah's voice dissolving into a wet, guttural whisper. "You always forget to lock it." He knew that wasn't his wife. Knew it the way he knew the weight of his sidearm, the way he knew the exact number of steps from the station door to the generator shed out back. But his fingers twitched toward his keys anyway. Jenna snatched his wrist. "Don't." Her nails bit into his skin. "It's lying." Marcus let out a high, thin noise, less a sob, more the sound a rabbit makes when the snare tightens. He was staring past Elias at the crack in the plywood. "The grass," he whispered. Elias didn't turn. He already knew what Marcus saw, the furrow in the meadow, motionless now, poised just beyond the floodlights, calculating. The radio died mid-static. The silence that followed was thicker than the plywood between them and the meadow. Elias pried Jenna's fingers off his wrist. Her nails had left half-moon indents in his skin, and motioned for them to back toward the storage closet. Marcus didn't move until Jenna yanked him up by his hoodie strings, his sneakers squeaking on the linoleum. Inside the closet, mops and rusted cans of pesticide pressed against them. Elias wedged a chair under the doorknob and killed his flashlight. Darkness swallowed them whole. Jenna's breathing was too loud, too quick. Marcus had stopped scratching. Now he just trembled, his forehead pressed to his knees. Outside, something dragged itself across the station's porch, not footsteps, not claws, like wet canvas being pulled over gravel. The sound stopped directly outside the closet door. Elias tightened his grip on his sidearm. The wood groaned under sudden pressure. Then Sarah's voice, so close it could have been whispering through the keyhole. "You used to sing to me when I couldn't sleep, Eli." The cadence was perfect. The pause before the last word, the way she'd always bitten her lower lip afterward. Elias felt his own throat constrict. Jenna's hand found his arm in the dark, her fingers digging in like she could physically anchor him to reality. The closet door creaked under invisible pressure. Elias swallowed hard. Sarah had bitten her lip like that every damn time. The thing outside inhaled, a wet, rattling sound that wasn't human, wasn't animal, wasn't anything that should have lungs. "Sing for me now." Jenna's grip on Elias' arm turned vice-tight. Marcus made a sound like a sob trapped in a closed fist. The door trembled, the chair leg scraping an inch across the floor. Elias raised his sidearm, the barrel wavering slightly. He knew bullets wouldn't stop it. Not really. But the weight of the gun was the only thing keeping his hand steady. Outside, the thing sighed, Sarah's sigh, the one she'd made when the morphine first kicked in. Then the dragging sound receded, moving toward the station's front door. Jenna's breath hitched. Is it? The front door's hinges screamed. Elias counted the footsteps, 3, 5, 7, each one heavier than the last, like something learning to distribute weight. The station's floorboards groaned under pressure they weren't built to bear. A cabinet door swung open in the main room, glass jars clinking. Then silence. Marcus's teeth chattered. Jenna's fingers dug harder into Elias' arm. The darkness in the closet was absolute, pressing against their eyeballs like a living thing. Then tap. The sound came again, tap tap, against the closet door, delicate as a fingernail testing a wineglass's rim. Jenna's grip on Elias' arm turned bone-crushing. Marcus made a wet, panicked sound and clamped both hands over his mouth. Silence. Then the thing inhaled through the wood, a sound like dry leaves sucked through a straw. Elias' finger hovered over the trigger. The closet reeked of pesticide and sweat. "You're not singing, Eli." Sarah's voice dripped with hurt, the exact tone she'd used when he'd forgotten their anniversary in 09. The door creaked inward an inch, the chair legs screeching. Jenna lunged, not toward the door but sideways, her elbow slamming into a shelf. A gallon of bleach toppled, the plastic cap popping off as it hit the floor. The stench burned Elias' nostrils. The dragging sound outside halted. The bleach pooled around Jenna's sneakers, its acrid tang cutting through the closet's stale air. Outside, the thing made a sound like a dog choking on a bone, wet, gurgling, angry. The dragging steps retreated fast, uneven, as if whatever passed for its lungs couldn't handle the chemical burn. Elias didn't lower his gun. "Move," he hissed, kicking the chair aside. Jenna grabbed Marcus by the hood, hauling him upright as Elias wrenched the door open. The station's main room stood empty, but the front door swung lazily on its hinges, early morning light slicing across the floorboards in jagged stripes. The coffee pot lay shattered near the radio. A single black handprint too large, fingers too long, smudged the wall above it. Elias tracked it with his barrel, his pulse hammering in his scar. "Out back," he ordered, jerking his chin toward the emergency exit. "Generator shed, now." Jenna dragged Marcus past the toppled chairs, her bad knee leaving bloody streaks on the linoleum. Elias backed toward the exit, his sidearm sweeping the shadows. The thing wasn't gone. He could feel it, the pressure in his sinuses, the way his sweat cooled too fast on his skin. The generator shed door stuck when Elias shoved it, swollen from last winter's snowmelt. Jenna threw her weight against it, her sneakers slipping in the gravel. Inside, the air smelled like diesel and mouse droppings. Marcus collapsed against a stack of oil cans, his arms streaked with blood and bleach. Elias jammed a rusted shovel under the door handle. "Window," he barked. Jenna dragged a tarp off the grimy pane. Outside, the meadow stretched empty, except for a single trail of bent grass leading straight to the shed. Fresh. Recent. Marcus made a wet sound, its circling. His fingers twitched toward his ruined arms, like it did with Dana before. A thud shook the shed's corrugated metal roof. Jenna flinched so hard her elbow cracked against the window frame. Elias raised his sidearm, just as the thing's shadow slid across the frosted glass. Not human, not animal. A distortion like heat haze off asphalt, except it pressed against the pane with deliberate, hungry pressure. The glass creaked under the pressure, not cracking but warping, as if the pane itself was softening under the thing's touch. Elias aimed at the center of the distortion. Jenna's breath fogged the window as she pressed closer, her whisper jagged. "It's testing the light." Outside, the shadow rippled, pulling back from the dawn-lit glass. Then, a sound like wet leather stretching. The shadow split, elongating into something too tall, too thin, its edges blurring as it slid down the side of the shed. Marcus whimpered, pressing his forehead to his knees. Elias kept his barrel trained on the window. How long until sunrise? Jenna checked her phone. The cracked screen flickered. 20 minutes, her voice cracked. It's learning fast. The generator shed's single bulb flickered, once, twice, before burning out with a sound like a dying insect. Elias didn't lower his gun. The shadow outside had gone still, pressed flat against the shed's eastern wall where the dawn light hadn't yet reached. Waiting. Jenna's phone screen cast jagged blue shadows across her face. "Batteries at 3%, she whispered. Marcus made a sound like a whimper trapped in his throat. Elias exhaled slowly through his nose. The thing outside inhaled in perfect sync, a wet, sucking noise that made the shed's metal walls vibrate. Then the voice came, not Sarah's this time, Dana's. The voice dripped through the metal walls like syrup. Dana's, but wrong, the edges frayed with something older. "Liam, Liam, please." It cracked on the second syllable, exactly the way Dana's had when she'd begged Liam not to break up with her in the diner parking lot 2 weeks ago. Jenna's phone clattered to the floor, the screen going dark. Marcus whimpered, his fingers scrabbling at his own throat. Elias thumbed the safety off his sidearm. The thing outside laughed, a sound like a tape recorder chewing its own wires. Then the shed's metal wall bowed inward with a shriek of stressed steel. Elias fired 3 rounds through the dent. Black fluid oozed through the bullet holes, smoking where the dawn light hit it. The thing hissed, a sound like steam escaping a corpse, and the pressure vanished. Jenna snatched her phone off the floor. The screen flickered to life, 1% just long enough to show the time. 5:47 a.m. She swallowed hard. 10 minutes till sunrise. The generator shed shuddered as something heavy thudded against the roof. Dust rained down onto their shoulders. Elias didn't blink, just kept his barrel trained upward, his finger taut against the trigger. The metal groaned under uneven weight, nails screeching as whatever was up there dragged itself toward the eastern edge, where the first weak rays of sun were beginning to lick the corrugated steel. Jenna pressed her palm flat against the wall. It's pulling back. Her voice shook, not running, adjusting. Marcus made a wet sound and pressed his forehead to his knees. Outside, the thing crackled, a noise like cellophane being crumpled inside a fist. Then silence. Elias counted the seconds under his breath. 5, 10. At 15, the meadow's sprinklers sputtered to life with a sound like coughing. The shed's eastern wall warmed under his palm. He risked a glance through the grimy window, just in time to see the last tendril of shadow dissolve into the tree line, the grass where it had stood already springing back upright, dew glittering like crushed glass. The generator shed's door groaned when Elias kicked it open, dawn spilling across the threshold like something wounded. Jenna dragged Marcus through the gap, his sneakers leaving dark smears on the gravel. Elias kept his sidearm raised, but the meadow stretched empty, the only movement the slow retreat of shadow between the pines. Jenna's phone buzzed once in her pocket before dying completely. She fumbled for it with shaking fingers. No signal. Her voice was raw. "But, look." Elias followed her gaze. The meadow grass where the thing had stood was dead, not trampled, not wilted, but desiccated as if every drop of moisture had been sucked out in an instant. The effect formed a perfect circle, 20 feet wide. At its center, a single boot print sank deep into the cracked earth. Too large, toes too long. Marcus made a sound like a sob caught in a vice. "It's marking territory." His fingers twitched toward his torn sleeves, like it did at the campsite. The radio in Elias' patrol car crackled to life as they piled in, Morales's voice slicing through the static. "Crow, respond. We've got reports of..." The transmission cut off with a wet pop, replaced by a sound like fingernails dragging across the microphone. Jenna recoiled from the speaker like it had bitten her. Elias slammed the gearshift into drive just as the tree line moved. Not wind, not animals, but a wave of shuddering branches rolling toward them like an invisible hand combing through the pines. Gravel sprayed as the tires caught traction. In the rearview mirror, something tall and jointless unfolded itself from the underbrush, its outline warping in the dawn light like a mirage. Jenna twisted in her seat, her knee leaving a smeared print on the upholstery. "It's following the road," she whispered. Marcus made a choked noise and folded forward, his forehead pressed to the dashboard. Elias didn't glance back. He knew what she saw, the way the thing kept just inside the tree line, matching their speed, its shadow stretching too long across the asphalt. Learning. The tires skidded as Elias took the turnoff too fast. Jenna's phone slid across the dash, its dead screen reflecting the thing's silhouette for one fractured second before clattering to the floorboards. Marcus whimpered. The patrol car's engine screamed as Elias downshifted around another bend. The tree line blurred past, but Jenna kept her eyes locked on the rearview mirror, where the thing's shadow pulsed between the pines, always exactly 50 yards back, always matching their speed. Elias' knuckles whitened around the steering wheel as the patrol car fishtailed onto the county road. Jenna's scream lodged in her throat when she saw it, the thing's silhouette flickering between the pines like a broken film reel, its elongated limbs keeping effortless pace with their speeding car. Then, abruptly, it stopped. Its forward momentum should have sent it sprawling. Instead, it froze mid-stride as if slamming into an invisible barrier. The thing's two long fingers spasmed, clawing at empty air while Dana's voice tore from its gaping maw, no longer a mimicry, but a raw, unhinged screech that rattled the car windows. Jenna clapped her hands over her ears. Marcus vomited between his knees. The sound cut off as suddenly as it began. In the rearview mirror, Elias watched the thing twist, its torso rotating 180 degrees while its legs remained planted. Then it was gone, melting backward into the forest-like ink in water. Only the tremble of disturbed branches marked its passage. Jenna's breath came in punched-out gasps. "Did we?" "No." Elias downshifted too hard, the gearbox grinding. His eyes flicked to the odometer, 4.7 miles from the station. He'd patrolled this stretch for 20 years. There were no fences here, no boundaries. Marcus lifted his head from the dashboard, his mouth slick with bile. It stopped. His fingers twitched toward the window, like it hit. "Don't." Elias jerked the wheel left onto the service road. The tires skidded on loose gravel. "Not yet." The patrol car's radio fizzed. Morales's voice broke through in jagged fragments. "Missing hikers, whole search team Crow, respond." The transmission dissolved into white noise. Elias thumbed the volume down without taking his eyes off the winding road. The tree line had gone still. No movement, no shadow, just the morning sun glinting off dew-laden spiderwebs. Jenna pressed her palm to the passenger window. "The trees," she whispered. "Look at the trees." Elias risked a glance. The pines nearest the road stood twisted, their trunks spiraled counterclockwise as if something massive had wrenched them while passing. Branches hung limp, needles desiccated mid-fall. No birds, no insects, just that perfect, watchful silence. Marcus moaned into his hands. "It's marking again." His fingernails dug fresh tracks through the drying blood on his arms. "Like the meadow, like the—" The radio exploded with sound, not static, not voices, but a wet, rhythmic slapping like meat being tenderized. Jenna recoiled so hard her skull cracked against the headrest. Elias slammed his palm down on the power button. The noise stopped. The silence that followed was worse. The patrol car's engine whined as Elias took the next bend too fast. Gravel pinged against the undercarriage. Jenna's fingers trembled against her seatbelt clasp. "Where are we?" "County line." Elias' knuckles whitened around the wheel. 2 miles. Marcus lifted his head, his pupils shrunk to pinpricks. "The wall." His voice was raw. "That's what it hit. That's why it stopped. Jenna twisted in her seat. The tree line blurred past, empty now. No shadow, no movement, just the occasional glint of dawn on broken beer bottles in the ditch. There's no wall out here. Elias didn't answer. His eyes flicked to the odometer again. 1 miles now. The county line marker would be a rusted metal sign half buried in blackberry bushes. Nothing special, unless you knew where to look. The county line marker flashed past, just a rusted metal sign swallowed by blackberry vines. Elias didn't slow down, but his shoulders dropped half an inch when the odometer ticked over to 5.3 miles. In the rearview mirror, the twisted pines along the road twitched, their spiraled trunks groaning as they began untwisting themselves in jerky, unnatural motions. Needles rained down in brittle showers. Jenna made a sound like a gasp caught in a wire. Marcus pressed his forehead to the back window. They're fixing themselves. His breath fogged the glass. The trees nearest the road stood rigid now, their trunks straight as if the last 20 minutes had never happened. Only the desiccated branches gave it away, their needles still curled inward like clenched fists. Elias kept his foot on the gas. The patrol car's engine whined. Jenna's fingers dug into the seat cushion. "It's not following," she whispered. Not a question, a prayer. The radio crackled just once before dying completely. Static hissed through the speakers for 3 heartbeats. Then silence. Real silence. Not the suffocating quiet of the tree line, but the ordinary hush of a car moving too fast down a back road at dawn. Elias exhaled through his nose. His scar ached. Marcus unclenched his fists. The bleeding had stopped, but his forearms were cross-hatched with red crescents. "It can't cross." His voice was raw. "The county line, that's the wall." Elias didn't answer. His eyes flicked to the rearview mirror, just in time to see the last twisted pine snap back into place with a sound like a whip cracking. The tree stood straight now, its bark smooth, its needles still green. Only the shattered beer bottles in the ditch proved anything had happened at all. Jenna twisted in her seat, her knee leaving a fresh smear of blood on the upholstery. The trees, her breath fogged the window. They're healing. Marcus made a wet, disbelieving sound. No. His fingers twitched toward his ruined sleeves, covering its tracks. The patrol car hit a pothole. Jenna's phone slid across the dash, its dead screen reflecting the straightening pines for 1 fractured second before clattering to the floorboards. Elias thumbed the volume knob on the radio off, then on again. Dead air. No static. No wet slapping. Just the hum of tires on asphalt. A crow cawed overhead. Jenna flinched so hard her seatbelt locked. Elias didn't blame her. It was the first bird they'd heard in hours. The trees behind them stood rigid now, their trunks smooth, branches swaying naturally in the breeze. Only the desiccated needles littering the roadside gave it away, brittle and gray, curled inward like fists around nothing. Marcus pressed his forehead to the rear window. His breath fogged the glass. "It's erasing it," he whispered. "Like the meadow grass, like—" his voice cracked. "Like Dana's tent." Elias checked the rearview again. The county line marker was a speck in the distance now, the blackberry vines around it thrashing in a wind that didn't reach the patrol car. He exhaled through his nose. His scar itched. Jenna fumbled for her dead phone. "We need to," her throat clicked. "Tell someone." Elias downshifted as they approached the turnoff for Route 9. The engine growled. He knew what she meant, not the cops, not the rangers, someone who'd believe them, someone who'd know. The patrol car's tires crunched over gravel as Elias pulled into the station parking lot. The sun had fully risen now, casting long shadows that shouldn't have made his hands tighten on the wheel. Jenna's breath fogged the window as she stared at the squat brick building, its boarded windows, its cracked concrete steps. Safe, supposedly. Marcus didn't move from his fetal position in the backseat until Elias popped the door open with more force than necessary. The station's screen door whined on its hinges as they entered. the smell of stale coffee and gun oil hitting them like a physical barrier between then and now. Elias went straight for the logbook. His fingers left smudges on the decades-old pages as he flipped back. 1978, 1985, 1992, each entry ending abruptly at the same coordinates. The county line marker now 5 miles behind them. The last note in each case file was always the same, written in different hands across different decades. Search terminated at boundary. No further leads. The station's fax machine was still wheezing out the missing persons form when Deputy Morales leaned against the filing cabinet, his coffee steaming in the sudden silence. "Bear attack," he said, not a question. The way his thumb tapped the rim of his mug said he'd already decided. Elias didn't look up from the logbook. No bears in Black Ridge since '89. The lie tasted like pennies. He tracked the last grizzly himself, a starving male with a limp, its ribs sharp as fence pickets. Put it down near the old ranger outpost. Buried the carcass where the soil was soft. Morales shrugged. Search team found blood tracks. He sipped his coffee. DNR's calling it by noon. Jenna made a sound like a laugh caught in a bear trap. Her knee hadn't stopped bouncing since they dragged her into the station, a jackhammer rhythm that vibrated the whole bench. Marcus was worse. He'd folded himself into the corner by the water cooler, arms wrapped around his ribs like they might split open. His pupils were still blown wide, dark as the hollows inside that sequoia. The station's screen door whined shut behind them like a living thing catching its breath. Elias didn't bother locking it. What was the point? The thing had already proven locks didn't matter. Jenna's sneakers left damp prints on the linoleum as she limped toward the coffee maker, her hands shaking too badly to pour. Marcus collapsed onto a bench, his arms crossed over his chest like he was holding his ribs together. Morales didn't ask why Marcus's sleeves were shredded, didn't comment on Jenna's knee, still oozing through the makeshift bandage Elias had torn from a first aid kit. Just slid 3 incident forms across the counter with a pen. "Missing persons," he said, like they were ordering lunch. "Standard questions." Jenna's laugh sounded like a branch snapping. "Standard." Elias took the pen. His handwriting was steadier than he felt. Dana Elizabeth Carter, Liam James Cho, names, dates, last known locations, lies stacked neatly in official boxes. The radio crackled with dispatch chatter, possible bear activity near Black Ridge Overlook, and Elias' jaw tightened. Bears didn't leave boot prints filled with warm blood. 4 days later, the search was called off. The agents arrived on a Tuesday, not that Elias kept track of days anymore. He'd been sitting on his porch steps, sharpening his skinning knife, when the black sedan rolled up without headlights. 2 men in suits stepped out, their shoes too polished for the gravel road. The taller one carried a briefcase. The shorter one smelled like burnt coffee and gun oil. "You're Elias Crow." Not a question. The taller agent's voice had the flat, practiced neutrality of someone who'd said those words too many times. Elias didn't stop sharpening the knife. "You lost, boys." The shorter agent smiled. It didn't reach his eyes. "We're here about your incident report." He held up a manila envelope. "The one you filed on July 12th. The Whetstone paused mid-stroke. Elias hadn't filed anything. Morales had, some boilerplate bullshit about bear attacks and inexperienced hikers. The taller agent tossed the manila envelope onto Elias' porch. It landed with a wet slap, the corners already curling from humidity. Inside, the photos were worse than Elias expected. Bodies twisted into spirals, torsos wrenched 180 degrees at the waist like the thing had tried to unscrew them from their own hips. The dates scrawled in the margins went back to '72, each location within 5 miles of Black Ridge's county line. The shorter agent lit a cigarette with a Zippo engraved property of U.S. Forestry Service. The flame caught the edge of Elias' incident report, the paper blackening as it curled. "Bear attacks," he said, watching the ash flutter to the porch boards. "Every damn time." Elias thumbed through the photos. The last one stopped him cold, a Polaroid of 3 rangers standing at the county line marker in '89. He recognized the tallest one, himself at 26, fresh out of the service, his scar still pink. The other 2 were strangers. All 3 held rifles. All 3 wore the same hollow-eyed stare Jenna had now. The caption read Containment Team Delta. Final Op. The taller agent nudged the briefcase with his shoe. It popped open, revealing a single page, a pencil sketch of the thing mid-mimicry, its mouth stretched around Dana's scream. The label Project Mimic was stamped in red across the bottom. Underneath, in shaky handwriting, do not cross county line after dark. The shorter agent flicked his cigarette into the dirt. The ember hissed out against damp earth. We'll handle the situation, he said, the word hanging between them like a noose. Consider it archived. His smile was a blade wrapped in silk, too smooth, too practiced. Elias had seen that look before, on officers briefing green recruits before a suicide mission. The taller agent reached into his breast pocket and produced a business card, matte black, embossed with a single line of numbers in sharp white type. No name, no agency, just 10 digits that felt heavier than the pistol at Elias' hip. For emergencies, he said, pressing it into Elias' palm. His fingers were cold. Not for questions. Elias turned the card over. The back was blank except for a single symbol stamped in faint silver, a circle bisected by a jagged line. The same mark he'd seen on the '89 containment team's gear, painted in glow-in-the-dark strokes on their rifle stocks. The same mark now fading under the porch light as the ink reacted to humidity. The shorter agent exhaled a plume of smoke toward the tree line. You saw a bear, Ranger. Not a suggestion, a command. 3 hikers got separated. 1 didn't make it. Tragic. He ground the cigarette butt under his heel with finality. The wilderness is unpredictable. Elias' scar itched. He knew the script. Knew it better than they did. He'd been the one writing those reports since '89, the lies stacking up like cordwood. But this time, his fingers twitched toward the Polaroid still clutched in his left hand, the one showing 3 rangers at the county line. Black Ridge Opus. Tell me again why we're not using silver bullets, Reyes muttered, checking the chamber of his standard-issue rifle for the 3rd time. The metallic click of the bolt echoed in the cramped helicopter cabin. Dr. Chi didn't look up from his notebook. Because it's not a fucking werewolf, he said, voice flat. The pages were filled with tight, precise handwriting, Navajo phrases intercut with hasty English translations. One sentence stood out, underlined twice. It doesn't bleed, it borrows. The chopper lurched as we hit turbulence. Outside, the Rockies sprawled beneath us like the spine of some enormous, sleeping creature. Black Ridge National Park stretched out ahead, its dense pine canopy broken only by jagged cliffs and the occasional fire scar. From up here it looked peaceful, normal. But the briefing files told a different story, 8 disappearances in 3 weeks, all within a 2-mile radius. The last one was a search and rescue team sent to find the others. They'd radioed in screams before going silent. When rangers found their camp, the tents were still standing, coffee steaming in mugs. No blood, just absence. Captain Vance leaned forward, his face half-lit by the dashboard glow. Rules of engagement are simple. We ID the target, we contain it, we bag it. No heroics. His eyes flicked to Reyes, then to me. If it talks in your voice, your mom's voice, fucking Taylor Swift's voice, you do not respond. Understood? The rotor blades thumped overhead, filling the silence that followed. The pilot banked hard and the landscape tilted beneath us. For a split second, I caught movement in the trees, not an animal running, but the trees themselves shifting, branches recoiling like something had passed through them. Then we were past it, descending toward a clearing marked with emergency flares, the last known coordinates of the SAR team. Vance slapped my shoulder. Welcome to the CCU, Carter. Hope you like camping. The moment the skids touched dirt, the forest went quiet. Not the gradual hush of animals sensing danger, but instant, unnatural silence. like someone had hit mute on the world. Dr. Chi was the first to step out. His boots sank into the damp earth and he froze. "Oh," he said softly, "it's already here." Behind us, the helicopter's engine sputtered, then died. Not a gradual wind down, but a sudden mechanical gasp. The pilot swore, slamming his fist against the controls. "What the hell?" His voice cut off as the radio crackled to life, spewing static. Then Ray's voice, clear as day. Get out now." Ray's himself stood beside me, eyes wide. That wasn't. The radio screamed, not static, not a voice, but something wet and tearing. Dr. Chi lunged forward, ripping the wires from the console. The silence returned, heavier now. Vance's jaw tightened. "Move out," he ordered. "Stick to protocol. Carter, rear guard." The clearing was wrong, too perfect. A circle of flattened grass, no footprints, no drag marks. Just a single SAR backpack propped against a tree, zipper open. Inside, a water bottle still cold, a half-eaten protein bar, and a GoPro, its red light blinking, recording. I didn't touch it. We followed the trail markers, orange tape fluttering from branches. Normal procedure, except the tapes weren't tied, were grown into the bark, fused like the trees had swallowed them whole. Dr. Chi ran a finger along one, his breath hitching. "This isn't." A twig snapped, not ahead, not behind, above. We looked up in unison. The pine boughs swayed, empty. Then a drip, warm, thick. It landed on Ray's cheek. He wiped it, fingers coming away black, not blood, ink, or something darker. The forest exhaled. From every direction at once, the missing SAR team's voices whispered, "Help us." Vance raised his rifle. Lights. Infrared beams cut through the gloom. The trees lit up in thermal greens and blues except for one. A shape woven into the branches, limbs too long, joints bending the wrong way. It wasn't in the tree. It was the tree, and it was laughing. Ray's gun clattered to the ground. No, no, no. The thing peeled itself free, bark splitting like skin. It hit the earth without a sound. Then it stood. Tall, skeletal, its face was a smooth, featureless oval until it rippled, and suddenly it wore Ray's expression. His terror, his open mouth. "Rules of engagement," Vance growled. The Skinwalker cocked its head and spoke in his voice. "No heroics." Dr. Chi's chant began low, guttural. The ash in his pocket was already in his palm. Too late. The forest screamed. Not with wind, not with animals, but with us. Every voice that had ever echoed through these trees poured from the Skinwalker's mouth at once. SAR team pleas, Ray's whimpers, Vance's barked orders, all layered over each other in a cacophony that made my teeth vibrate. The sound didn't come from its mouth. It came from inside my skull, like my brain was the speaker. My vision blurred at the edges, the world tilting sideways as the thing took a step forward, its limbs unfolding too many joints, too many angles. Dr. Chi's chant sharpened, his free hand flinging wet ash in an arc. The particles hung in the air like black snow, and where they touched the Skinwalker, its stolen face melted, flesh sliding off like wax. It didn't bleed. It reconfigured, muscle and bone writhing beneath the surface. Then it lunged. Vance's rifle barked 3 times. Silver-laced rounds punched into its chest, useless. The holes sealed instantly, the bullets pushed back out with a wet pop. The Skinwalker didn't stagger. It didn't even seem to notice. One moment it was 10 feet away, the next its hand was around Vance's throat, lifting him off the ground like a doll. His boots kicked empty air. Ray scrambled for his gun, but the forest moved. Roots snaked up, coiling around his ankles with a sound like cracking knuckles. He screamed, then choked as a tendril of bark slithered into his mouth, probing, searching. Dr. Chi grabbed my arm, his nails drawing blood. "The recorder," he hissed. "The GoPro, it's listening." I understood. The Skinwalker didn't just mimic voices, it consumed them, replaying them like a tape. And that GoPro in the backpack had recorded everything. Vance's face purpled. The Skinwalker tilted its head as if savoring his gurgles. Then it changed again, its fingers elongating, splitting into 5 smaller versions of itself, each one wriggling toward Vance's eyes, ears, nose. Dr. Chi's chant became a shout. He threw the rest of the ash. The world went white. When my vision cleared, the Skinwalker was gone. Vance collapsed, gasping, his throat ringed with black fingerprints. The trees were just trees. The silence was just silence. Then the GoPro in the distant backpack beeped. Recording stopped. Ray's vomited. Vance spat blood. Dr. Chi's hands shook as he reloaded his ash pouch. And from deep in the forest, something clapped. Slow, mocking. In perfect sync with my racing heartbeat. Ray's wiped his mouth, eyes darting between the trees. That wasn't protocol, he whispered. Vance coughed, rubbing his throat where the blackened fingerprints were already bruising purple. Fuck protocol, he rasped. Chi, what the hell was that? The anthropologist didn't answer. His gaze was locked on the GoPro, its blinking light now dark. It's learning, he said finally. Every time we speak, every time we react, it's filing us away. His fingers tightened around the ash pouch. That camera wasn't left behind. It was planted. A branch snapped. We spun as one, rifles up, but the forest was still, too still. The clapping had stopped. The silence was worse. Then Ray's radio crackled to life, his own voice but slower, stretched thin like tape played backward. Planted. It was planted. It was planted. The words looped, distorting with each repetition until they dissolved into static, then laughter. Not human, not animal, the sound of splintering wood. Vance tore the radio from Ray's belt and crushed it under his boot. The plastic shattered, but the laughter continued, fainter now, filtering through the trees from no discernible direction. Dr. Chi pressed a hand to the nearest pine, his palm flat against the bark. It's in the roots, he murmured. The whole forest is its nervous system. A gust of wind sent the orange trail markers fluttering, except there was no wind. The air was dead. The tapes weren't moving. The trees themselves were breathing, their branches flexing like ribs. Vance cursed, slamming a fresh magazine into his rifle. New plan. We burn the fucking thing out. Dr. Chi grabbed his wrist. Fire won't. The ground lurched beneath us. Not an earthquake, a pulse. The earth rippled like water, sending us stumbling. Rays fell hard, his rifle skidding into the undergrowth. From the dirt where it landed, something pale and fibrous wriggled upward. Not a root, not a worm, but a finger, jointless and too long, probing the air. More followed, dozens, bursting from the soil in a grotesque harvest, each one twitching, searching. The GoPro in the distant backpack beeped again. Recording started. Dr. Chi's voice was barely audible over the wet sound of the fingers flexing. Don't move. The Skinwalker didn't need to hunt us anymore. We were standing in its hands. The realization hit me like a bullet, the trembling earth, the probing fingers, the way every tree leaned slightly inward, as if watching. Dr. Chi's grip on my arm was the only thing keeping me from bolting. His whisper was barely a breath. It's mapping us. Ray's whimpered, his body rigid as one of the fingers brushed his boot. The thing recoiled, then curled around his ankle like a vine. It didn't pull. It pulsed, as if savoring his terror. The GoPro's red light blinked steadily from the backpack, a cyclopean eye drinking in every twitch. Vance's jaw flexed. Slowly, so slowly, he reached for his belt, where a silver-tipped combat knife glinted. The moment his fingers touched the hilt, the forest inhaled. The fingers stiffened. The laughter in the trees sharpened to a screech, a sound like nails on slate, but beneath it was Ray's voice, garbled and wet. Knife, knife, knee. The Skinwalker was learning faster than we could adapt. Dr. Chi's free hand moved in tiny, precise motions, smearing ash across his lips. When he spoke, the words were blurred, distorted. Don't let it hear you. The fingers recoiled at the sound, writhing like burned tendrils. A plan formed in the silence. If it was listening, if it needed our voices, then silence was our weapon. I nodded to Vance, then pointed to the knife, the GoPro, and finally my own throat. His eyes narrowed, but he understood. With agonizing slowness, I knelt, my joints screaming against the movement. The fingers quivered but didn't strike. My fingertips brushed the cold metal of Ray's abandoned rifle. The forest held its breath. Then the GoPro beeped. The fingers surged. Vance's knife flashed, severing the one coiled around Ray's leg. The thing spasmed, spraying a viscous black fluid that sizzled where it struck the leaves. The forest screamed, not in pain but in recognition, the sound echoing from every direction at once, a chorus of every voice it had ever stolen. Dr. Chi lunged for the GoPro, ash flying from his hands. The moment he touched it, the lens cracked, a hairline fracture splitting the glass like a pupil dilating. The laughter choked off mid-breath. The fingers went limp. The forest exhaled. And from the fractured GoPro, a new sound emerged, not a voice, but a whisper, wet and close, as if something was pressed against the other side of the lens. "Got you." The whisper wasn't electronic, it wasn't recorded. It was alive, slithering from the shattered GoPro like a physical thing, curling around Dr. Chi's wrist before he could pull away. His veins darkened beneath his skin, branching black under the surface. He didn't scream. His mouth opened, but no sound came out, just a slow, steady drip of ink from his lips. Vance moved faster than I'd ever seen him. The silver knife flashed, severing the tendril of darkness connecting Chi to the camera. The anthropologist collapsed, gasping, his fingers clawing at his throat. The inky veins receded, but not completely. They pulsed under his skin now, a slow, sick rhythm matching the tremors in the earth. Ray's was hyperventilating, his bootlaces snagged on the twitching remains of the severed finger. It's in the tech," he choked out. "The fucking camera." Vance crushed the GoPro under his heel. The plastic shattered, but the lens rolled away intact, the crack widening like a grin. From the fracture, a single drop of black liquid welled, then stretched toward us, defying gravity. The forest responded. The trees groaned, their roots heaving upward like the spines of some buried beast. The trail markers tore free from the bark, the orange tape now bleeding the same inky blackness. Dr. Chi grabbed my arm, his voice raw. "The ash coat the lens." I didn't hesitate. My fingers dug into the pouch at his belt, coming away coated in wet, granular ash. The moment my fingers touched the cracked glass, the lens shrieked, the sound vibrating up my arm like an electric shock. The black liquid recoiled, then retreated into the fracture with a sound like a slurp. Silence. Then from the depths of the forest, a new sound, clapping. But not mockingly slow this time. Fast, frantic. Hungry. Vance's teeth gleamed in the dim light. "It's pissed." Dr. Chi stared at his black-veined hand. "No," he whispered. "It's excited." The clapping stopped. The forest leaned closer. And the GoPro's red light flickered back on. Recording. The word pulsed in my skull like a second heartbeat. Every piece of tech we carried, radios, scopes, even Ray's fucking fitness tracker, was a potential doorway now. Vance yanked his earpiece out and crushed it underfoot, but the damage was done. The Skinwalker had tasted electricity, and it wanted more. The trees swayed without wind, their branches creaking in unison like the rigging of a ship. Dr. Chi pressed his blackened palm to the ground, his breath ragged. "It's rerouting," he muttered. Following the root systems toward, his head snapped up. The flares. The emergency markers we'd passed glowed ominously through the pines. Not the steady burn of magnesium, but a flickering, breathing light. As we watched, one flare twitched, its casing splitting open like a seed pod. A thin, jointless finger emerged, groping at the air. Ray's made a sound like a gutted animal. Vance chambered around. "Silver's worthless. Chi, what else disrupts it?" The anthropologist's eyes were glassy. Disruption requires contradiction, he slurred, the black veins crawling up his neck. It mirrors, so he convulsed suddenly, ink dripping from his nostrils. When he spoke again, his voice wasn't his own. It was layered, multiplied, the Skinwalker testing out his vocal cords like a new suit. Feed it lies. The forest erupted in laughter. Vance didn't hesitate. He grabbed Chi's jaw, forcing his mouth open, and jammed the silver knife between his teeth. The anthropologist's scream was human this time, raw and pained, but the inky veins recoiled, retreating from the metal. Chi gasped, collapsing against me. Fake signals, he wheezed. Overload its database. Ray's fumbled for his thermal scope, hands shaking. I can hotwire it to. A branch snapped overhead. We looked up. The Skinwalker hung from the pine boughs, its limbs bent at impossible angles, its face a smooth void, until it rippled and suddenly it wore all our expressions at once. Vance's snarl, Ray's terror, Chi's pain, my own frozen shock. Its mouth unhinged, and the forest screamed through it. 1,000 stolen voices layered into a single, deafening command. Run! The flares exploded. Not in fire, but in sound. A cacophony of every recorded scream, radio transmission, and snapped twitch the Skinwalker had ever consumed. The shockwave knocked us flat. My eardrums popped, warm blood trickling down my neck. Through the ringing, I saw it. The thing convulsing, its stolen faces glitching like a corrupted video file, its limbs seizing as the conflicting signals tore through it. Vance was shouting, but I couldn't hear him. Chi was smearing ash on bullet casings, loading them into Ray's rifle with frantic hands. The Skinwalker twitched, its form stabilizing. Then Ray's took the shot. The ash-coated round tore through its chest. This time the hole didn't close. This time it bled. Not blood, not ink. Static. The Skinwalker looked down at its wound, almost curious. Then it smiled. And the forest began to rewind. Branches straightened, fallen leaves levitated. The shattered GoPro pieces skittered backward across the ground, reassembling. Dr. Chi's voice was hoarse with dread. It's not just learning. The lens clicked back into place. The red light blinked. It's editing. The words left Dr. Chi's lips as the Skinwalker's wound sealed itself, not healing, but undoing, the static bleeding backward into its chest like a VHS tape reversing. The trees shuddered, their bark rippling with embedded whispers. The GoPro's reassembled lens focused on us with a mechanical whir. Vance acted first. His boot came down on the camera again, but this time, the second it cracked, the forest shrieked, the sound less anger than feedback, a deafening digital screech that sent us clutching our ears. The Skinwalker staggered, its stolen faces pixelating. Dr. Chi lunged, slapping his ash-coated palm against the thing's chest. Where his fingers touched, the static spread, eating through its form like corruption through a file. Ray's was already reloading, hands steady for the first time. One more, he rasped, tossing Vance an ash-filled cartridge. The captain loaded it with a savage grin. The shot hit the Skinwalker between its glitching eyes. This time the static didn't retreat. It burst, spraying outward in jagged black tendrils that writhed like dying snakes. The forest recoiled, roots retracting, branches curling inward as if ashamed. The GoPro's light flickered erratically, then died. Silence. Then from the darkness a new sound, beeping. Ray's fitness tracker. Its screen flashed, 12,000 steps, before the numbers dissolved into gibberish, then into a single, pulsing word. Mine. The Skinwalker wasn't gone. It was rebooting. Dr. Chi grabbed my arm, his veins black to the elbow. Run, he croaked. We ran. Not toward the extraction point, not toward safety. Toward the one place even the Skinwalker couldn't follow. The wildfire scar. Behind us, the forest glitched, trees snapping in and out of existence like bad CGI. The Skinwalker's laughter chased us, now layered with the mechanical click of a camera shutter. Vance's voice was raw with fury. "Chi, tell me Ash works on satellites." The anthropologist didn't answer. He didn't need to. The Skinwalker was learning. And so were we. The wildfire scar loomed ahead, a skeletal expanse of charcoal and brittle pines, the earth still warm beneath our boots. Behind us, the forest convulsed, birthing shadows that twisted into mockeries of our silhouettes. Ray's tripped over a blackened root, his fitness tracker emitting a final, distorted chirp before the screen cracked. The glass didn't shatter. It melted, dripping onto his wrist like tar. Vance dragged him up, snarling, "Move or die." The scar should have been dead, empty, but the moment we crossed the burn line, the air thickened, pressing against our skin like static cling. Dr. Chi stumbled, his inky hand pressed to his chest. "It's here," he whispered. "In the ash." I saw it then, the way the soot swirled against the wind, coalescing into vague, humanoid shapes. The Skinwalker wasn't just in the trees, it was in the aftermath. Ray's voice cracked. "How do you kill something that lives in what's already burned?" A shadow at the edge of the scar twitched. Not a tree, not an animal, just darkness given joints, its limbs unfolding like origami in reverse. It didn't advance. It rendered pixel by pixel until its face resolved into a perfect replica of Dr. Chi's, down to the black veins spiderwebbing his skin. The real Chi hissed through his teeth. "It's adapting." His fingers dug into the ash at our feet, smearing it across his lips again. "We need noise, real noise, not recordings." Vance unclipped a grenade from his belt. "Decoy, 3 seconds." The pin clicked. The moment the spoon flew, the Skinwalker's head snapped toward the sound. Asterisk, too fast, too eager. Vance hurled the grenade into the unburned trees behind it. The explosion was deafening, the shockwave ripping through the scar. The Skinwalker screeched, its form dissolving into static as the conflicting sounds overloaded its senses. For 3 glorious seconds, it was blind. Dr. Chi didn't waste them. He grabbed a charred branch, thrust it into the embers at our feet, and hurled the flaming brand into the Skinwalker's chest. The thing didn't burn. It buffered, flames stuttering in and out of existence like a corrupted video. Then it rewound, the fire snuffing backward into the branch. Ray's made a small, broken sound. Vance reloaded. And the Skinwalker smiled with Dr. Chi's mouth. "Next," it said, in all our voices at once. The forest answered. From every blackened tree, 1,000 lenses clicked. Not cameras, not eyes. The pinecones themselves split open, their scaled mouths gaping to reveal wet, glassy interiors, each one reflecting our faces back at us in warped fisheye. The Skinwalker didn't need technology anymore. It had seed pods. Dr. Chi's chant died in his throat as the nearest pinecone swiveled toward him, its aperture dilating. A drop of black fluid oozed from its core, elongating into a tendril that reached for his ash-smeared cheek. Vance's knife flashed, severing it midair. The severed end writhed, then dissolved into static that hissed against the charred earth. Ray's backpedaled, boots kicking up soot. "It's everywhere." The ground beneath him breathed. A fissure split the scar, exhaling a plume of ash that coalesced into a hovering cloud, a screen, pixels resolving into a grainy replay of our panicked faces from seconds ago. The Skinwalker wasn't just mimicking us now. It was broadcasting us. Vance spat onto his knife. The saliva sizzled where it touched the silver. "Chi," the chants louder. The anthropologist's voice was raw, but he obeyed, the ancient syllables layering over each other until the air itself vibrated. The pinecones shuddered, their lenses cracking like ice. The ash screen flickered. Then rewound. Dr. Chi's eyes widened. "No, no, no." The playback reversed to the moment Vance had drawn his knife. The fissure inhaled, sucking the ash screen back into the earth. The severed tendril reformed, slithering back into the pinecone. Time didn't just bend here. It looped. The Skinwalker stepped forward, its borrowed face melting into Ray's wide-eyed terror. "Rules of engagement," it whispered, plucking the words from Vance's earlier briefing like fruit from a branch. "No heroics." I grabbed Dr. Chi's shoulder, the flare gun. He understood. While Vance distracted the thing with a flurry of silver strikes, Ray's fumbled the flare pistol from his belt. The moment the cartridge clicked into place, the forest shivered, pinecones snapping shut like startled clams. The Skinwalker's head whipped toward us. It knew. Rays fired. The flare streaked past the creature's shoulder, not at it, but at the dead satellite uplink tower jutting from the scar's heart. The moment the magnesium light hit the rusted dish, the metal screamed, the sound reverberating through the skeletal forest like a struck gong. The Skinwalker glitched, its form fracturing into jagged afterimages. Dr. Chi was already moving, ash-coated hands slamming against the creature's chest. Now. Vance's knife found its throat. This time the static didn't bleed. It burst. The explosion of corrupted data knocked us flat. The pinecones rained down around us, brittle and lifeless. The fissure sealed with a sound like a dying hard drive. Silence. Then from the cooling flare's embers, a single, pulsing word flickered in the soot. "Rebooting." Vance hauled me up by my collar. "Move." His voice was hoarse. "Before it finds a new fucking Wi-Fi signal." We ran toward the extraction point, the forest's dying whispers curling at our heels like bad reception. Ray's was limping, his trackerless wrist oozing black where the melted glass had seared his skin. Dr. Chi's breath came in wet hitches, the veins under his jaw pulsing darker with every step. Behind us, the scar spat embers, not fire, but static, pixelated sparks that stuttered midair before winking out. The chopper was already waiting, rotors blurring the twilight. The pilot's face was hidden behind blackout goggles, but I saw his grip tighten on the collective when he caught sight of us. Vance tossed the silver knife into the dirt before boarding. "Burn it all," he rasped. The pilot didn't ask questions. As we lifted off, the forest below twitched. Trees bent unnaturally, their branches knitting together into a lattice, no, a net, straining upward as if to snag us from the sky. Dr. Chi pressed his forehead to the window, his reflection overlaying the nightmare below. "It's not done," he murmured. The crate in the cargo hold tapped. Morse code. Ray's last words. Vance didn't flinch. He pulled a dampener charge from his vest and primed it. The Skinwalker's tapping sped up, frantic now, as if it sensed the countdown. Dr. Chi closed his eyes. The charge detonated with a subsonic thump. The crate fell silent. For now. The debrief room smelled like disinfectant and bad coffee. 3 suits from Cryptid containment oversight flanked the table, their expressions unreadable behind blackout visors. Vance's reassignment orders lay between us like a loaded gun. "Alaska," one suit said, as if that explained everything. Maybe it did. Dr. Chi didn't wait for dismissal. He stood, peeling his security badge from his chest with deliberate slowness. The black veins under his skin had receded but not disappeared. "I'm done," he said, and the words weren't defiance, just exhaustion. The suits didn't protest. They'd seen the footage from his GoPro, the way his own reflection had winked after the Skinwalker's defeat. Vance lit a cigarette right there on the polished table. "Burn the whole fucking forest," he muttered, blowing smoke at the nearest suit. They didn't flinch. Just slid a file toward me, thicker than the one they'd given him. The helicopter bay was empty when I found Chi. He was staring at the containment crate, now sealed with sonic dampeners and a strip of Navajo prayer paper. "It's still in there," he said, not turning. "Not the body, the pattern, like a virus." His hand hovered over the crate. Something inside tapped, 3 quick, 2 slow. Ray's heartbeat before the roots took him. I didn't ask him to stay. Vance's chopper left at dawn. No handshake, no words, just a glare that said, "Don't fuck up my legacy," as he boarded. Chi was gone before sunrise, his Jeep kicking up dust on the access road. They'd let him keep the ash pouch. Alone in the hangar, I opened the new file. Black Ridge was just the beginning. The Rougarou case glared up at me, 27 missing, 3 crime scenes with chest cavities turned inside out like gloves. The attached Polaroid showed a child's sneaker, laces still tied, resting atop a moss-covered skull. The crate tapped again. I slapped it, the noise stopped. Outside, an engine revved. My ride. The new team would be waiting in Louisiana. I tucked the file under my arm, grabbed my pack, and didn't look back. Someone had to. Next deployment is in Louisiana. They say the Rougarou's worse. Project Skin Deep. The pen bled ink across the page like a slow puncture wound. Dr. Elias Werner stared at the stain, noting how it spread between the words specimen and uncooperative, before tossing the report aside. The armored transport's interior smelled of sterilized metal and his own sweat, though he'd sworn the air filters were set to Arctic levels. Outside the slit window, Nevada's desert yawned empty under a white-hot sky. No roads, no landmarks, just the occasional glint of something buried in the sand that might have been glass or bone. The transport lurched to a stop so abruptly his forehead grazed the steel bulkhead. A voice, mechanized and sexless, announced, "Black Spire Research Facility. Disembark Protocol Alpha 9. The doors hissed open to reveal 3 armed guards in black and tactical gear, flamethrower nozzles angled at the ground like wary hounds. One stepped forward, retinal scanner glowing crimson. Werner leaned in, catching his own reflection in the lens, pale, hollow-eyed, already guilty of something. The briefing room was a tomb with fluorescent lighting. Dr. Leon, her face a network of old scars barely concealed by foundation, slid a tablet across the table. The screen displayed a grainy surveillance feed, an elderly Navajo woman knitting in a UV-lit cell, her fingers moving too fast, the yarn never tangling. "Skinwalker 9, Leon said. "Recovered from shiprock after it. Replaced a family of 5. Even the dog, it's polite. That's the problem." Werner's new ID badge weighed heavy around his neck. The photo showed him smiling, a mandatory expression for clearance photos, though he couldn't recall forcing it. Leon tapped the tablet again. The feed switched to infrared, the woman's silhouette now a writhing nest of heat signatures, limbs bending where limbs shouldn't. "It mimics down to capillary patterns," she said. "But ask it where it learned your mother's recipe for postle. Go ahead." The containment cell smelled of ozone and wet clay. Skinwalker 9 looked up from its knitting, eyes milky with cataracts that hadn't been there on the feed. "Dr. Werner," it said, its voice a perfect match for his thesis advisor S. Then softer, "Ellie called you bug." "Why?" The UV lights flickered. Werner's hand jerked toward his hip, where a sidearm should have been, before remembering the facility's one unbreakable rule: no weapons near the specimens, especially the ones that knew your sister's name. Dr. Leon's boot tapped the floor in a deliberate pattern, 3 quick, 1 slow, a warning. Skinwalker 9 smiled, revealing teeth filed flat. "You're wondering how deep the mimicry goes," it mused, dropping a stitch only to pick it up with fingers that now had his scar across the knuckle. "Deeper than your scalpels, Doctor, deeper than your dreams." The yarn in its lap pulsed, suddenly glistening. A shadow moved wrong in the corner of Werner's vision. The guard by the door, Peterson, his badge read, was breathing too evenly. No tremors, no sweat. Protocol demanded rotations every 20 minutes. Peterson had been on post for 37. The intercom crackled. "Shift change in T-2 minutes, announced the sexless voice. Skinwalker 9 sighed, its shoulders sagging into a posture Werner recognized from his own bathroom mirror. "Such a shame," it said, just as the UV lights buzzed, asterisk stuttered asterisk, and Peterson's pupils dilated black. "I so wanted to hear about the fire." The yarn slithered to the floor, revealing itself as a length of intestine, still wet. Werner backed toward the door, but Peterson's hand, now boneless, now wrong, shot out to grip his wrist. The skin split silently down the middle like overripe fruit. Leon moved faster, jamming her stylus into the guard's throat. The thing wearing Peterson gurgled, but its grip didn't loosen. The lights flickered again. Somewhere below them, an alarm wailed, not the shrill pulse of a breach, but the deep, oscillating groan of something powering down. Skinwalker 9 stood, its spine elongating with a sound like wet branches snapping. The elderly woman's face slid away like melted wax, revealing nothing beneath but a smooth, hungry dark. The door hissed open. The real Peterson staggered in, bloodied and wild-eyed, just as the UV grid failed entirely. In the sudden dark, Skinwalker 9 laughter came from everywhere at once, a perfect mimicry of Dr. Leon's voice, then Werner's own, then the high, reedy giggle of a child he'd almost forgotten. "Tag," it whispered. "You're it." A wet crunch echoed as Peterson's body hit the floor, his ribs folding inward like a collapsing accordion. Werner's heel slipped on something warm and stringy, the intestine, still twitching, before Leon yanked him backward into the hall. The emergency lights stuttered to life, painting the corridor in pulsing red. Shadows stretched too long behind them. Over the intercom, the automated voice droned. "Night protocol initiated. All personnel report to designated safe rooms." The words cut off abruptly, replaced by a familiar hum. Skinwalker 9 had hijacked the system. "Ellie screamed for 11 minutes, it cooed, its voice now a seamless blend of Werner's sister and the guard he just watched die. "Want to hear?" Somewhere in the maze of vents above them, metal groaned under sudden, unnatural weight. Leon shoved Werner toward a service elevator, her lips forming two silent words as the red lights died again. "Don't blink." The darkness behind them rippled, something moving without sound, without form, without the decency to pretend anymore. The elevator doors wheezed shut a half-second too late. A hand, pale, delicate Ellie's hand, slid between them, the fingers bending backward like spider legs to pry them apart. Werner stomped down hard, hearing bones crunch that weren't bones at all. The thing in the dark giggled, high and girlish, as the severed hand dissolved into a puddle of black mucus at their feet. Leon's stylus flashed in the dim light, its tip glowing ultraviolet. She jammed it into the control panel, overriding the descent. The elevator plummeted 3 levels before shuddering to a stop, throwing them both against the wall. Above, through the grating, something heavy thudded against the shaft, then began to stretch, its mass oozing downward like heated tar. Werner's breath fogged the air despite the facility's climate control. The cold wasn't from the vents. It was the kind that lived in unmarked graves and childhood closets, the kind that whispered your next in a voice you'd remember on your deathbed. Leon's stylus sputtered. The UV light died, and from the darkness above, Skinwalker 9 exhaled, a sigh that smelled of his sister's shampoo and freshly turned earth. The elevator doors groaned open to reveal Lab 7, its emergency lights casting long shadows from the dissection tables. One slab held what was left of Dr. Chen, his ribcage splayed open like a textbook diagram, except the organs inside weren't human. They pulsed, glistening wetly in shapes that made Werner's eyes ache. Leon didn't flinch. She wrenched a fire axe from the wall and tossed it to him. "Aim for the marrow," she hissed. "It hesitates there." Something dripped from the elevator shaft behind them. Not blood, not mucus. Something that wriggled as it hit the floor, sprouting needle-thin fingers that scrabbled toward their ankles. Werner brought the axe down hard. The thing shrieked, a sound that started as Chen's voice and ended as static. The severed fingers dissolved, but the stains they left behind began crawling up the walls, spelling words in a language that burned to look at. Lab 7's intercom crackled to life. "Ellie's waiting," Skinwalker 9 crooned, but the voice was Leon's now, down to the faint Vietnamese lilt. The real Leon didn't react, already dragging a canister of liquid nitrogen toward the vents. "It's in the ducts," she muttered. "Which means," the ceiling tiles above them breathed. A single tile lifted, just enough to reveal an eye, Werner's eye, down to the sleep-deprived starburst of veins, blinking lazily at them before vanishing with a wet pop. Werner's axe trembled in his grip. The thing in the vents was learning too fast. It shouldn't have been able to mimic retinal patterns, not without a sample. Unless it had been watching through Peterson's eyes the whole time. The realization hit him like a cattle prod. Every glance, every blink, every time he'd rubbed his tired eyes in front of a camera feed. Skinwalker 9 hadn't just stolen voices. It had been recording them. A drop of something thick and iridescent landed on the dissection table. Then another. The ceiling sagged, bulging downward like a water balloon stretched to bursting. Leon slammed the nitrogen release valve just as the mass dropped, freezing midair in a grotesque parody of Chen's face, mouth still stretched around a silent scream. The frozen thing shattered on impact, but the pieces twitched, skittering across the floor toward the shadows. From the vents came a sound like 1,000 fingernails scraping metal, then silence, too silent, the kind of quiet that comes when something stops pretending to breathe. Werner's pulse hammered in his ears. The axe handle creaked under his grip. Somewhere in the dark, Skinwalker 9 exhaled, a perfect mimicry of his own relieved sigh the moment before. "Got you," it whispered. Lab 7's emergency lights flickered back on, revealing the ceiling tiles rippling like water disturbed by something surfacing. The shadows pooled wrong, slithering toward the nitrogen canister as if drawn to the cold. Leon kicked it over. Liquid nitrogen spilled across the floor, freezing the crawling stains solid mid-crawl. The thing in the vents hissed, its voice fracturing into static before resolving into Dr. Chen's last words. "Check the..." The dissection table shuddered. Chen's organs unfolded, elongating into spindly limbs that clawed at the air. Werner swung the axe, not at the writhing mass, but at the UV emergency light above it. Glass shattered. The burst of ultraviolet radiation made the thing scream in a dozen voices at once, its stolen flesh blackening like paper held to a flame. Leon didn't waste the moment. She wrenched open a panel labeled UV Override, Last Resort. The klaxon that blared wasn't human. It was the sound Skinwalker 9 had made when they'd first captured it, a wet, guttural wail that shook the walls. The vents above them split open, disgorging a torrent of something that wasn't blood or bile but worse, a living spill of stolen faces and half-formed limbs, all melting together as the UV grid powered up. Werner glimpsed Ellie's smile in the chaos, her lips parting to say his name, just before Leon grabbed his collar and yanked him toward the door. "Run," she snarled. "It's not her, it's never been her." The hallway outside was a slaughterhouse. Security Officer Ruiz hung from the ceiling by his own intestines, his jaw unhinged like a snake's, mouth stretched wide enough to fit a human skull. His dangling fingers twitched in a crude approximation of Morse code. SORRY. Werner's boots slipped in the gore, but the axe stayed clenched in his fist. Behind them, the UV lights pulsed erratically, casting Skinwalker 9's shadow in jagged, panicked strokes against the walls. The shadow had too many joints. Leon wrenched open a maintenance hatch, revealing a ladder that descended into pitch blackness. "Sublevel 9, she panted. "The original containment chamber. It's lined with silver nitrate, the only thing that ever held it." A wet thud echoed from Lab 7. Something heavy hit the floor, then something light, then something that sounded like bare feet slapping tile in a perfect imitation of a child's sprint. Werner didn't look back. He counted rungs as he climbed down, 12, 13, 14, before his foot met empty air. The drop was shorter than he expected. The landing wasn't. Werner's knees buckled on impact, sending him sprawling onto a floor that moved, a carpet of writhing, finger-length worms that recoiled from his touch with a sound like radio static. Leon landed beside him, her stylus flaring back to life. The UV light revealed the truth. The worms weren't worms. They were hair. Human hair still attached to follicles still growing. The walls of Sublevel 9 shimmered with them, undulating like wheat in a breeze. Skinwalker 9 first victims, its first skins. From the shaft above them came a noise like 100 throats clearing at once. Then Ellie's voice, sweet and clear. "Bug, I'm stuck." The ladder rattled. Something began to descend. Something that hadn't been there when they climbed down. Leon's stylus swept the room, UV light glinting off the silver nitrate lining the walls, except where the coating had peeled away in ragged strips, revealing raw concrete beneath. Something had been scratching at it. Recently. The hair carpet rippled toward those bare patches like iron filings to a magnet. Werner's axe swung on instinct, shearing through a clump of writhing strands that burst into black steam. The stench was unbearable, burnt sugar and gangrene. Above them the descending thing paused. Then it laughed. Not Ellie's laugh, not even human, just a wet, clicking chitter that made the hair stand up on his arms. The stylus flickered. Leon's hand shook. The UV beam landed on the far wall, illuminating a message scratched deep into the silver. "You look like them when you sleep." The latter groaned. Skinwalker 9's shadow spilled down the shaft, stretching, twisting, splitting into a dozen malformed limbs that groped blindly for purchase. One finger Peterson-esque, complete with his wedding band, hooked around Werner's ankle. The ring was still warm. Werner swung the axe. The blade bit deep into something that wasn't bone, releasing a geyser of black fluid that hissed like acid on metal. The thing in the shaft shrieked, a sound that started as Ellie's sob and ended as the wail of a dying rabbit. The hair carpet surged, strands knitting together into a crude mockery of legs, arms, faces, all melting into each other like wax dolls left in the sun. Leon's stylus flared brighter. The UV light scorched the forming shapes, but the shadows between them thickened. A hand, small, delicate Ellie's hand, emerged from the writhing mass, palm upturned. In its center sat a single molar, Werner's molar, the one he'd lost at 7 playing tag in the graveyard behind their grandma's house. Skinwalker 9 voice dripped from the ceiling. "You buried it under the oak. You whispered find me asterisk." "I did." The latter shook. Something landed behind them with a wet smack. Leon spun, stylus raised, but the thing wasn't attacking. It crouched in the corner, a grotesque sculpture of Peterson's torso fused with Chen's ribcage. Ellie's face stretched over the mess like a poorly fitted mask. Its fingers tapped the floor in perfect sync with Werner's racing pulse. "Tag," it whispered, its voice fraying at the edges like old tape. The UV light hit its eyes. The pupils split vertically. The word came out wrong, half laugh, half scream, all hunger. The hair carpet erupted. 1,000 strands lashed upward, weaving into a net that caught Leon's wrist mid-swing. The stylus clattered to the floor, its beam cutting erratic arcs across the ceiling. Skinwalker 9's shadow unfolded, stretching, splitting, until it wasn't a shadow at all but a hole in the world, a mouth lined with teeth that weren't teeth. Werner's axe came down on the net. The strands snapped with a sound like piano wire breaking, spraying black ichor that burned where it landed. Ellie's face slid off the thing's skull like wet parchment, revealing the void beneath. It wasn't empty. Something moved in there, something that rippled with the rhythm of Werner's own breathing. Skinwalker 9 lunged not at him but at the fallen stylus. Its fingers melted around the device, flesh bubbling as it absorbed the UV emitter whole. The light didn't die. It just moved, dancing behind the thing's ribs now, illuminating 100 shifting faces trapped inside like fireflies in a jar. The ladder above them twitched. Then it stretched, rungs bending like taffy as something colossal pulled itself down from the shaft. The walls breathed inward, silver nitrate peeling away in sheets. The hair carpet surged toward the gaps, strands braiding themselves into something that wasn't limbs or faces but worse. A crude mockery of motion, of hunger, of the concept of skin. Leon's boot crushed the stylus underfoot, killing the UV light. In the sudden dark, Skinwalker 9 voice came from everywhere at once. "SHHH, Ellie's sleeping." The lie tasted like blood in Werner's mouth. The thing in the corner unfolded, its silhouette splitting into a dozen spindly shadows that lashed out, not at them, but at the walls. Silver nitrate sizzled where it touched, revealing raw concrete beneath. The hair carpet shrieked, strands knitting into a lattice that crawled up the exposed patches like ivy on a gravestone. Werner's axe struck true, shearing through the writhing mass, but the severed threads twisted midair, embedding themselves in his forearm like acupuncture needles. The pain wasn't the problem. The memories they carried were Ellie's 7th birthday, the cake she'd dropped, the way she'd laughed through tears. Moments Skinwalker 9 couldn't possibly know. Leon moved like a woman possessed, ripping open a maintenance panel to reveal a single red switch labeled Purge, Do Not Engage During Active Breach. Her fingers hovered. The thing wearing Peterson's wedding ring giggled, its voice fraying into static as it whispered, "You first." The ceiling above them dripped, droplets forming a perfect circle around Leon's feet. Not acid, not blood, silver nitrate. The facility was weeping its own defenses. Werner's infected arm twitched, not his own muscles, but the hair-thin strands buried in his flesh, pulling him toward the thing in the corner. Its void face split vertically, revealing a wet darkness that pulsed in time with his heartbeat. "Come home, bug," it cooed, Ellie's voice layered over Chen's dying gasp. The axe slipped from Werner's grip. The floor tilted. Somewhere beyond the ringing in his ears, Leon screamed, not in fear but in triumph, as she threw the switch. The last thing Werner saw before the UV barrage hit was his own reflection in Skinwalker 9 pupil, and it was smiling. The Purge protocol sounded like God clearing his throat. Sublevel 9 became a sun, UV embers erupting from every surface, searing the hair carpet to ash mid-crawl. The thing wearing Peterson's face shrieked, its stolen skin sloughing off in ribbons of black grease. Werner's infected arm bubbled, the embedded strands wriggling out like burnt worms before disintegrating. He stumbled backward, directly into Leon's outstretched hand. Her fingers felt wrong. Too cold, too smooth, no fingerprints. The light show lasted 7 seconds. 7 seconds of Skinwalker 9, many voices harmonizing in agony. 7 seconds of the walls weeping silver. 7 seconds for Werner to realize Leon's grip hadn't loosened. He turned. Her face was perfect. Too perfect. No scars. No pores. Just smoothness stretched tight over something that wasn't skull. "Rule 1, not," Leon whispered, her breath smelling of his sister's shampoo. "Never trust the switch." Behind her, the real Leon's corpse slid from an air vent, her stylus still clutched in rigor mortis fingers. Skinwalker 9 remains twitched in the UV afterglow, a faceless puddle of half-melted features and twitching tendons. Then it laughed, a wet gurgle that started as Peterson's last chuckle and ended as the creak of a coffin lid opening. The hair carpet stirred. Silver nitrate dripped from the ceiling in syrupy strands, and Werner's left hand, the one not Leon still held, flexed on its own. "Tag," his mouth said without his consent. The facility lights hummed. Somewhere above them, the vents breathed in. The UV embers flickered out one by one, plunging sublevel 9 into a darkness so thick it pressed against Werner's eyeballs. Not Leon's grip tightened, fingers elongating, joints popping as they reshaped into something with too many knuckles. Her thumb stroked his pulse point in time with Ellie's favorite lullaby. "SHHH," she cooed, her voice unraveling at the edges. "It's just the night shift." The corpse in the vent twitched, its rigor mortis fingers spasming toward the fallen stylus. The light winked back on, just long enough to reveal the real Leon's empty eye sockets. Werner's stolen arm jerked, fingers knotting in not Leon's hair, except it wasn't hair anymore. It was wire. Barbed and squirming, each strand tipped with a needle-thin tooth. The purge switch above them clicked, not off but reset. The UV embers reignited in a staccato burst, painting the room in strobe light flashes. In the gaps between light, not Leon's face slipped, revealing the writhing nest of stolen vocal cords beneath. Ellie lied, it rasped through Chen's ruined larynx. She screamed for 12 minutes. The corpse in the vent lunged, not at Skinwalker 9 but at Werner, rigor mortis fingers clamping around his ankle with bone-crushing force. The real Leon's dead lips peeled back in a grin too wide for her face. "Rule 2, she hissed through blackened teeth. "Never trust the corpse." Behind her, the puddle that was Skinwalker 9 rippled, forming a perfect silver nitrate mirror, and in its reflection, Werner saw the truth. His own left hand wasn't his anymore. The fingers bent backward. The nails were black, and the wedding band was Peterson's. Not Leon's wire hair sang as it unraveled, each strand splitting into 100 thinner filaments that burrowed into the walls like roots. The silver nitrate wept faster, pooling around their feet in viscous puddles that reflected nothing but hunger. Werner's stolen hand twitched, not toward the axe, but toward his own throat, fingers flexing with the memory of strangling something small and warm. The purged lights flickered again, catching the corpse's empty sockets just as they blinked. Skinwalker 9 remains bubbled, reforming into a grotesque marionette of half-melted limbs and stolen faces. Ellie's smile stitched to Chen's scream. Peterson's wedding ring fused to Leon's scalp. It hummed, a sound that started as elevator music and ended as the wet crunch of a child's spine. The corpse's grip on Werner's ankle tightened. "Rule 3, it whispered, its breath smelling of embalming fluid and possil. "Never trust the axe came down on its wrist with a sound like snapping celery. The severed hand crawled up Werner's leg, fingers digging into his thigh like meat hooks. The purge lights failed entirely, not from power loss, but because the UV emitters themselves were unspooling, their filaments slithering away like silver worms. Not Leon's face split vertically, revealing a darkness that pulsed in time with the facility's dying generator. Somewhere above them the vents exhaled, a gust of air that carried the scent of Ellie's shampoo and freshly turned earth. The hair carpet screamed. The mirror laughed, and Werner's stolen left hand waved goodbye. Reinforcements arrived at dawn, though dawn didn't exist 3 miles underground. They found Skinwalker 9 curled in its containment chamber, docile as a sleeping cat, wearing the form of a Navajo grandmother again, except her knitting needles were rib bones, and the yarn between them breathed. The sedative darts barely pricked its skin before it sighed, eyelids fluttering shut. But just as the airlock sealed, its lips parted, whispering Werner's next words back at him in his own voice, down to the subconscious rasp he'd picked up from chain-smoking during grad school. The lead operative's pen froze mid-log. Final entry. It learns faster than we do. Werner's reflection in the airlock glass winked. The operatives didn't notice. Neither did the corpse they dragged out, the one wearing his ID badge, its face frozen in a rictus of terror that didn't quite mask the relief underneath. The real Werner, if real still applied, stood among them, flexing his borrowed fingers, tasting borrowed memories. Peterson's wedding band fit perfectly now. The vents above hummed, a sound like 1,000 stolen voices digesting. Skinwalker 9's last gift sat heavy in his pocket, a single molar, warm as a heartbeat. "Find me," it seemed to whisper. "You will." The facility lights flickered once, twice, then steadied into a sickly fluorescence. The new shift arrived, fresh faces, fresh voices, fresh skin. Werner No. Peterson adjusted his tie with fingers that remembered strangling, caressing, knitting flesh. His badge swung from his neck. The photo smiled, always smiling. Behind him, the vents breathed and the darkness between the walls stretched, and the silver nitrate wept silently onto the floor. "Tag," whispered a voice that wasn't a voice. Werner's borrowed lips twitched. "You're it." The pen in his left hand bled ink across the new report like a slow puncture wound. Black Ice Protocol. "You ever hear what happens to the other guys?" Mercer asked, tossing a crumpled file onto the steel table between us. It slid to a stop just shy of my coffee cup, the word "terminated" stamped across the front in angry red letters. I took a slow sip, letting the cheap Scad breakroom brew burn my tongue. "Assume I haven't." The veteran agent leaned back in his chair until the plastic groaned, his boots scuffed to hell and smelling like a wet dog propped up on the table. "First recruit lasted 6 hours. Second made it 2 days before something in the Appalachians peeled his face off like a banana. Third," he nodded at the file, "Carson got himself digested halfway through orientation." Mercer's grin was all teeth, the kind that made you check your 6. He flicked the file open with one calloused finger, revealing autopsy photos of what might have been a human ribcage if something hadn't chewed the bones into splinters. Pro tip, Rook: when the briefing officer starts sweating, start praying. The overhead lights buzzed like angry wasps as SCAD's Director Graves stormed in, her lab coat flaring behind her like a pissed-off ghost. She slapped a map of the Yukon onto the table, pinning it with a hunting knife that definitely violated agency regulations. "Deadman's Gorge," she said, like it was a curse. 14 disappearances in 6 weeks. Locals say it walks like a man, but ain't, Mercer finished, twirling the knife between his fingers. "Wendigo country." I almost laughed until I noticed Graves' left hand. The pinky was prosthetic, the joints too smooth. She caught me staring. "Lost it to a ghoul in 09. Next time it'll be your throat." The way she said it, like she was discussing coffee orders, made my neck prickle. The helicopter blades thrummed like a dying man's heartbeat as we descended into Deadman's Gorge. Mercer tossed me a flare gun, standard issue, but the modifications were anything but. The barrel glowed faintly blue with liquid nitrogen rounds. "Try not to shoot your dick off," he shouted over the rotor noise, jerking a thumb at Cho, who was white-knuckling his seat straps. "That one's still figuring out which end the bullet comes out of." Below us, the research outpost looked like a child's toy smashed under a boot. The roof had caved in at a diagonal, and dark streaks radiated outward from the doorway like frozen lightning. Our pilot, a grizzled ex-Marine with a name tape that just read "Nope," didn't land so much as hover 6 inches off the ground. 30 minutes, he barked. Not 31. Mercer hit the snow first, his boots barely crunching. He moved like the cold didn't touch him, probably because something worse already had. SCAD vets all had that look, like their shadows didn't quite match their outlines. I followed, my breath fogging the air in quick bursts. Cho stumbled out last, his thermal scanner already beeping erratically. He said, voice cracking. "There's no heat signatures inside, but the walls are reading at -20. Mercer didn't answer. He was staring at the doorway, where something had clawed 4 parallel grooves into the steel frame. The marks started at 7 feet up and ended at knee level, like whatever made them had been crouching when it left. The wind howled through the shattered windows of the outpost, carrying with it the scent of rust and something sweetly rotten. Mercer stepped over the threshold without hesitation, his boots crunching on broken glass that glittered like ice in our helmet lights. "-20 means one thing," he muttered, kicking a mangled chair aside. "It's been here recently." Cho's breathing hitched over the comms. "What does?" Mercer didn't answer. His light caught on a dark spray across the far wall, the kind of splatter that starts high and arcs downward, frozen mid-drip. He scraped a gloved finger through it, held it up to his visor. "Carson's last meal, beef stew, told him not to eat before drop." I moved toward a toppled desk, where a SCAD-issue tablet flickered weakly under a dusting of frost. The screen showed a frozen video feed, a blur of movement, then static. The timestamp was 3 weeks old. Beneath it, something gleamed. I reached down and pulled a silver pendant from the ice. The chain snapped clean. The inscription read "Property of E. Diaz." The pendant froze to my glove instantly, the chain dangling like a silver spiderweb. I held it up just as Mercer's light swung over. "Diaz." His voice went flat, not angry, not scared. "The tone you use when the floor drops out from under you. She was Carson's partner, went MIA same night." Cho's boot crunched too loud behind us. Guys." His thermal scanner was shrieking now, the screen flashing erratic red blips. "We've got movement, north wall. It's—" The words died in his throat as his light caught the ceiling. The blood wasn't frozen up there. It dripped. The first drop hit Cho's visor with a wet plink. He stumbled back, gagging, as the crimson smear slid down his faceplate in a lazy spiral. Mercer's rifle snapped up before I could blink, tracking something in the rafters that my eyes couldn't parse. Just a flicker of movement, too long in the limbs, too fluid for anything with bones. "Don't fucking move," Mercer hissed over comms. His laser sight trembled ever so slightly, painting a red dot on a ventilation grate that was definitely breathing. The metal ribs expanded and contracted in a slow, wet rhythm. My own breath fogged the inside of my helmet as the smell hit, like a butcher's floor after a midnight power outage. The grate exploded outward in a shower of rusted screws. Cho screamed as something landed between us with the sound of a wet rug hitting concrete. My brain refused to process it properly, tall enough that its distended ribcage brushed the ceiling, fingers too many and too long, knuckles scraping the floor. The thermal cam in my helmet shorted out in a burst of static, leaving only the nightmare in glimpses. A jaw unhinged like a snake's, teeth that weren't shaped right for eating meat, and eyes that reflected our helmet lights back at us in fractured, hungry shards. It cocked its head at Cho's whimpers, the motion eerily human. Then it spoke. Its voice was Cho's, exactly Cho's. "I'm so cold," it whispered through our helmet comms, not radio static but intimate, like lips pressed to your ear in the dark. Cho's rifle clattered to the floor. The thing didn't blink. Its eyes, too many, too wet, tracked the vibration of the gun hitting steel. Mercer's electronet launcher hissed as it charged, but the Wendigo was already moving, not toward us, toward the shadows. It stepped sideways, joints bending all wrong, and vanished behind a support beam that should have been too narrow to hide anything. The stench lingered, freezer burn and spoiled milk. "Thermals are fucked," I muttered, slamming a fist against my helmet's side. The display fizzed, showing 3 heat signatures, us, and then a 4th, flickering in and out like a dying bulb. There, by the emergency exit. The emergency exit door swung open with a groan that had no business being that loud. Cho's breath came in jagged bursts over the comms, his helmet cam jerking wildly as he backpedaled. It's behind us." Mercer didn't turn. His electronet launcher hummed like a pissed-off hornet, tracking the flickering thermal signature by the exit. "Wrong," he said, too calm. "That's the other one." My stomach dropped. The SCAD briefing hadn't mentioned multiples. The thing by the exit didn't move like the first. It shivered into existence, limbs telescoping out from the shadows in segments, as if someone had fed a puppet through a meat grinder and sewn it back together wrong. Its ribs pulsed like gills. Cho's scream cut off mid-breath, not because he stopped, but because something ate the sound. The second Wendigo flickered forward in that unnatural stutter step, its elongated fingers twitching toward Cho's throat. Mercer's electronet fired with a sound like 1,000 snapping rubber bands, the charged filaments spreading midair into a crackling web. It caught the thing square in the chest, blue electricity spiderwebbing across its emaciated torso. The Wendigo didn't scream. It laughed, a wet, gurgling noise that echoed through our comms like a corrupted audio file. Then Cho was gone. 1 second he was there, backpedaling into a shelving unit. The next, the first Wendigo had him by the ankle, yanking him upward into the rafters with the ease of a fisherman hauling up a trout. The shelving collapsed in a cacophony of shattered glass and splintered wood, and Cho's helmet cam showed a dizzying flash of ceiling, then darkness. Then, oh Christ, the ceiling again as the thing dangled him upside down by his leg. His rifle skittered across the floor toward me, the stock smeared with something black and glistening. Mercer didn't waste a breath. He lunged for the second Wendigo, his combat knife flashing in the dim light. The blade sank into its ribcage with a sound like puncturing a rotten pumpkin. The thing didn't react. It just looked down at the knife sticking out of its chest, then back up at Mercer, its head tilting to an impossible angle. Its mouth unhinged slowly, revealing a second set of teeth further back in its throat, tiny and needle-like, vibrating in anticipation. I didn't think. I grabbed Cho's rifle and fired 3 rounds into the thing's face. The first 2 tore through its cheeks, the third shattering its left eye into a burst of vitreous gel. It staggered back, clutching at its face, black fluid oozing between its fingers. Mercer wrenched his knife free and drove it upward under the thing's jaw. The blade emerged through the top of its skull with a sickening pop. The Wendigo collapsed like a puppet with its strings cut, but Mercer was already spinning toward the rafters where Cho's screams had turned wet and guttural. Above us, something dripped, thick and dark, splattering across my visor in Rorschach blots. I didn't need thermals to know it was Cho's blood. That would have been warmer. The first Wendigo crouched in the shadows of the ventilation shaft, its elongated fingers wrapped around Cho's thigh like a kid holding a drumstick. Cho's helmet dangled by its strap, the faceplate cracked. Inside, his lips were blue, moving soundlessly. The Wendigo cocked its head, studying him with the curiosity of a cat examining a crippled bird. Then it bit down. The crunch vibrated through my bones. Cho's scream cut off mid-breath, replaced by the wet sound of something chewing. Mercer's electronet launcher clattered to the floor empty. He drew his sidearm instead, a modified Glock with rounds that glowed faintly ultraviolet. "Rook," he said, without taking his eyes off the rafters. "Bait Protocol 12. Now." I fumbled for my belt pouch, fingers numb. The thermal blanket was standard issue. The MP3 player duct taped to it was not. Mercer had insisted. "You'll thank me when the Skinwalker starts sobbing in your dead mom's voice," he'd said during the flight. Now I thumbed the playback button, and the speakers whined to life with the sound of a child crying. The Wendigo froze mid-chew. Its head snapped toward the sound, elongated neck vertebrae popping like a zipper undone. Cho's leg slipped from its grasp, hitting the floor with a wet thud. The thing didn't blink, just tilted its head, listening to the recorded sobs with the intensity of a starving man hearing dinner bells. Mercer didn't waste the opening. He lunged for Cho's dropped electronet, rolling behind an overturned lab table as the Wendigo unfolded itself from the rafters in one grotesque, unbroken motion. Its joints didn't bend so much as rearrange, the sound like a bag of chicken bones being crushed under a boot. The thermal blanket's crinkling foil seemed to mesmerize it. The thing took a halting step forward, then another, fingers twitching at its sides like it was remembering how to reach for something. I kept the MP3 player going, backing toward the emergency exit where the second Wendigo's corpse leaked black ichor across the floor. Mercer's voice crackled in my earpiece. "Lure it to the ravine, 60 yards northeast." His breath came in sharp bursts. He was already moving, boots crunching through the snow outside. The Wendigo's head swiveled between us, nostrils flaring as it caught Mercer's scent. For a heartbeat, I thought it would bolt after him. Then the recording hit a particularly gut-wrenching sob, and its attention snapped back to me like a rubber band. It followed me outside with the eerie patience of a stalking predator, its gait uneven, sometimes on all fours, sometimes upright, like it couldn't decide which version of human to mimic. The thermal blanket's crinkles echoed unnaturally loud in the silent woods, the MP3 player's sobs distorting as the cold drained its batteries. Behind us, the outpost's broken windows watched like empty eye sockets. The wind howled through the trees like a dying thing, and my breath fogged the air in quick, panicked bursts. The Wendigo kept pace behind me, not too close, not too far, like it was savoring the hunt. Its footsteps made no sound in the snow. Mercer's voice crackled in my earpiece, tight with static. "Ravine in 20. Drop the blanket and dive left on my mark." I didn't answer. The Wendigo's head tilted at the sound of his voice, its nostrils flaring as it tested the air. The child's sobs from the MP3 player were slowing, the batteries fading, and with them, the thing's fascination. Its fingers twitched, claws flexing like it was rehearsing the act of gutting me. The ravine appeared suddenly, a jagged maw in the earth, half hidden by drifts. Mercer crouched behind a boulder to the left, his electronet launcher reloaded, the blue charge light blinking ready. The Wendigo paused at the edge, its two long shadows stretching toward me like a living thing. For a heartbeat it just stared, its black eyes reflecting the weak moonlight in fractured shards. Then it spoke, not in Cho's voice, not in any human voice, but in something older, guttural, the words slithering between its teeth like worms. "Hungry," it rasped. I dropped the blanket. The MP3 player hit the snow with a muffled thud, the sobs cutting off abruptly. The Wendigo's head snapped toward the sound, its jaw unhinging with a wet pop. Mercer's voice hissed in my earpiece, "Mark." I dove left as the electronet burst over my shoulder, crackling blue filaments spreading wide. But the Wendigo wasn't where it should have been. It sidestepped with that impossible liquid motion, the net sizzling harmlessly against the snow. Its head swiveled toward Mercer, neck bones clicking like a winding clock. Then it lunged. Not at Mercer, at me. Mercer's curse cut through the comms a half-second before the Wendigo's claws grazed my shoulder. I rolled, feeling the razor tip scrape across my armor plating with a sound like nails on a chalkboard. The thing overshot, its momentum carrying it past me in a blur of distended limbs and frostbitten skin, but it twisted midair like a cat landing crouched between me and the ravine. Its breath came in ragged, steaming bursts, each exhale carrying that sweet-rot stench. The electronet's glow reflected in its black eyes, making them look like oil slicks under moonlight. It didn't attack, just watched. Then it smiled too wide, too many teeth, and whispered in Carson's voice, "You're the new one, aren't you?" Mercer's boot crunched snow behind me. "Don't talk to it," he growled, circling wide to flank. His electronet launcher whined as it recharged, too slow. "They get in your head." The Wendigo's grin stretched wider, cartilage in its jaw popping as it spoke again, this time in Diaz's voice, the words syrup-slow and wrong. "Remember the pendant, Riley?" Its tongue flicked out, black and forked, tasting my fear. She screamed when I... Mercer's boot connected with its ribs in a crunch that echoed across the ravine. The thing folded around the impact like wet cardboard, but its fingers lashed out, snagging Mercer's ankle as he recoiled. They went down in a tangle of limbs and frost, Mercer's knife flashing once before the Wendigo twisted his wrist with a sound like green wood splitting. I didn't think. I lunged for the dropped electronet, my fingers closing around the grip just as the Wendigo's head snapped toward me. Its pupils dilated, prey recognition, and it abandoned Mercer in a blur of motion. The charge indicator blinked red, 30% power, not enough for a full net. So I improvised. The electronet launcher bucked in my hands as I jammed the muzzle against the Wendigo's exposed ribs and pulled the trigger. At this range, the filaments didn't have space to expand. Instead, they erupted inward, burrowing into its flesh like electrified worms. The thing's scream wasn't human. It was the sound of 100 ice cubes cracking in a glass of blood. Black fluid geysered from its mouth as the charge cooked it from the inside. Its fingers spasmed around Mercer's ankle, claws scraping uselessly against his armored boots. I kept the trigger depressed until the launcher's overheating warning shrieked in my ear, then kicked the convulsing Wendigo off Mercer with a boot to its caved-in sternum. It skidded across the snow toward the ravine's edge, twitching like a downed power line. Mercer rolled upright, clutching his dislocated wrist. "Nice improvisation," he spat through gritted teeth. "Now finish." The Wendigo's hand shot out, claws sinking into the frozen earth to halt its slide. Its head lolled toward us on a broken neck, one eye ruptured from the voltage, the other glaring with feral intelligence. It wasn't done. Mercer's knife flashed again, this time buried to the hilt in the Wendigo's remaining eye. The thing didn't scream. It laughed, a wet gurgle that bubbled up through the black ichor pouring from its mouth. Its fingers flexed, claws scraping against rock as it began dragging itself forward, toward us, blind but still grinning. I backpedaled, boots sliding on ice, and nearly tripped over the abandoned electronet launcher. The charged light blinked a feeble red. Useless. Mercer's dislocated wrist hung at a grotesque angle, but he was already reaching for his sidearm with his good hand. The Wendigo's head snapped toward the movement, nostrils flaring as it tracked the scent of sweat and blood. Then the ground gave way. The ravine's edge crumbled under the thing's weight with a sound like 1,000 eggs cracking. For a heartbeat, the Wendigo hung suspended, a grotesque parody of a diver mid-leap, before gravity took hold. It didn't scream as it fell. It whispered, the words carrying up on a gust of frozen wind. Not finished. The whisper curled around us like smoke, lingering long after the Wendigo vanished into the ravine's shadows. Mercer didn't lower his sidearm until the last echo of cracking ice faded. His breath came in ragged bursts, frosting the air between us. "Rule 1, he muttered, flexing his dislocated wrist with a wince. "They always lie." Snow crunched underfoot as I edged toward the ravine. The drop was sheer, a jagged maw of ice and shadow where the Wendigo should have been impaled on stalagmites. Nothing moved below except the wind teasing loose powder into phantom shapes. No blood, no body. Mercer's glove closed around my shoulder, yanking me back. "Don't." His grip was iron, but his pupils were blown wide, the first crack in his veteran calm. That's how Carson bought it, thought he saw it die too. He jerked his chin northeast, where the outpost's broken silhouette hunched against the moonlight. "Move. Extraction S in 12. We found Cho halfway there. Cho's body was propped against a pine tree like a discarded mannequin. His throat had been torn open in a jagged smile, the edges of the wound frosted over with ice crystals that glittered in our helmet lights. His fingers were jammed into his own mouth, self-administered, Mercer noted with clinical detachment, like he was reading a grocery list. The Wendigo had made him do it before it ate the rest. I knelt beside Cho's corpse, my gloves slipping on the frozen blood crusting his tack vest. His eyes were wide, pupils blown, not with fear but with something worse, recognition. "It showed him," Mercer muttered, prying the dog tags from Cho's stiffened fingers. "They always show you right at the end, makes the meat sweeter." The wind howled through the pines, carrying the scent of copper and freezer burn. My HUD flickered, not from interference but from my own trembling. Mercer didn't comment. He just handed me Cho's sidearm, the grip still warm from dead fingers. "Keep the safety off," he said, and that was the eulogy. We hit the extraction point with 90 seconds to spare. The pilot, nope, didn't ask about Cho. Didn't need to. His eyes flicked to the tree line behind us, the way a man checks for stray dogs after hearing a growl. The helicopter's interior lights were already red-locked for biohazard protocols when the cargo bay door hissed open. The containment pod hissed as hydraulic locks engaged, its reinforced steel walls vibrating with the thing's thrashing. Black fluid seeped through the drainage grates, smoking where it touched the snow. Mercer kicked the pod with a boot that had seen better days. "Happy fucking birthday, Scad," he muttered. The Wendigo's final whisper, "Thank you," still clung to my eardrums like frostbite. Kessler hadn't spoken since the ravine. The medic sat curled in the cargo bay's corner, his gloves caked in frozen blood that wasn't his. His pupils kept darting to the pod, then away, like a man trying not to stare at an open wound. The pilot didn't even glance back as we lifted off. His name tape, nope, flapped in the rotor wash. The Wendigo's claws scraped against the pod's interior in a rhythm that almost sounded like Morse. Tap, scritch, pause, tap, tap. Mercer's jaw tightened. He pulled a flask from his vest and took a swig that smelled like industrial cleaner. "Don't listen," he said, offering it to me. "That's how it gets in." I took the flask. The alcohol burned worse than the Yukon wind. Outside, Deadman's Gorge shrunk into a jagged scar beneath us, its shadows stretching long in the dying light. Something moved down there, a flicker of white against white, gone before I could blink. Mercer followed my gaze. "Yeah," he said, too quiet. "There's always more." The debrief room smelled like bleach and bad decisions. Director Graves tapped her prosthetic pinky against the steel table. Click, click, click. Her gaze locked on the containment pod's feed. The Wendigo hadn't stopped moving since we'd caged it. Its elongated fingers traced the electronet burns on its ribs in a grotesque parody of self-soothing. Subject demonstrates cognitive retention of human speech patterns, Graves said, like she was reading a grocery list. The screen flickered as the Wendigo pressed its face to the camera, its remaining eye dilating. It whispered something in Diaz's voice. Graves didn't flinch. Prep it for sub-level 5. Kessler made a wet noise in the back of his throat. He hadn't stopped shaking since the flight back, his fingers compulsively tracing the bite marks on his forearm. Not his blood, not his blood. Mercer tossed him the flask. Drink or shut up. I flexed my own hands under the table. The electronet burns hadn't fully healed, the skin still cracked when I made fists. Graves noticed. Her smile was a scalpel's edge. Congratulations, Agent Voss. You've been upgraded from bait to handler. She slid a new assignment slip across the table. The subject line read, Charleston Sewers laughing subject. The assignment slip stuck to my fingers like a damp napkin. Charleston, hot, wet, crawling with things that didn't belong, perfect SCAD territory. Mercer snorted when he saw the subject line. Laughing thing, huh? He wiped his knife clean with a rag that smelled like gun oil and regret. Heard about that one. Sounds like a fucking clown car full of nightmares. Kessler finally spoke, his voice sandpaper raw. It mimics children. His fingers kept tracing those bite marks over and over. Diaz told me before. He swallowed hard. The flask trembled in his grip. Graves' prosthetic pinky tapped a staccato rhythm on the steel table. 12 disappearances in 8 weeks, all under 12 years old. The way she said it, flat, factual, made my stomach twist. Last witness described it as Daddy's face but wrong, and it laughed the whole time. The containment pod hissed behind us, the Wendigo's claws scritching against reinforced glass. Mercer didn't turn, just tightened the strap on his wrist brace with his teeth. When's the drop? The pilot's voice crackled through the overhead speakers. 30 minutes to Charleston, as Mercer tossed me a fresh electronet cartridge. It landed in my lap with a metallic thunk, still warm from his vest. Rule 2, he muttered, loading his own. They always come back hungry. Thank you for listening to tonight's stories. If you enjoyed them, please leave a like and subscribe.